Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into a small American kitchen where the kettle is rattling, the wallpaper is peeling, and one woman is attempting to keep an entire family alive with 3 potatoes, half a cup of flour, and a level of quiet determination that would frighten most modern project managers. We are talking about what it felt like to be a housewife during the Great Depression. Not the softly lit version where everyone wears charming aprons, preserves peaches, and gathers around the radio looking attractively concerned. I mean the real version, where the peaches may be gone, the radio belongs to the finance company until the final payment is made, and the charming apron has been cut from a flour sack because the flour company accidentally provided the nicest fabric you own. For millions of women, the home became the place where the depression was translated into daily life. A lost job became a thinner soup. A closed bank became a rent payment hidden in a sugar bowl. A failed harvest became flour stretched with cornmeal. A husband's worry arrived through the front door, hung its hat on a peg, and sat silently at the supper table while you tried to behave as though boiled cabbage had always been the plan. You cooked without enough food, cleaned without enough soap, heated rooms without enough fuel, patched clothing that had already been patched, and somehow remained responsible for keeping everyone cheerful. Apparently economic collapse was unpleasant, but allowing the children to notice it was considered poor housekeeping. Of course, there was no single depression household. Life changed enormously depending on where you lived, what work your family had lost, and which doors society was already inclined to close in your face. A black mother in the segregated South, a farm wife on the Great Plains, an immigrant woman in a northern city, and a middle-class homemaker watching her savings disappear did not experience hardship in the same way. Many women also worked for wages inside and outside the home, even while newspapers and employers continued describing paid work by married women as vaguely improper. The Depression was very interested in female labour. It was simply less enthusiastic about admitting that it depended on it. If you enjoy these quiet journeys into history, please consider liking the video and subscribing, but only if you genuinely want to. It helps the channel enormously, and I am always grateful for it. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Somewhere, at this exact moment, someone is listening beneath a blanket at 2 a.m. while worrying about something they cannot solve until daylight. You are among friends here. The channel is also on Spotify, so you can find us there if you prefer listening with your phone turned over and the screen safely out of sight. Now dim the lights, put on a fan if you have one, pull the blanket up and let your shoulders loosen. Turn the pillow to the cool side while modern refrigeration is still available to you. Get truly comfortable, because tonight you are going to spend a day managing a household in a world where almost every problem must be solved with patience, string, bacon grease, and the firm belief that an object is not worn out until it has physically escaped. But before we begin, let us consider a few questions. How many meals can you produce from one chicken before the chicken becomes more of a philosophical memory than an ingredient? How many times can coffee grounds be used before the drink is simply warm brown encouragement? What happens when the rent collector arrives and your husband has spent the morning standing in a line with 400 other men? How do you wash 6 people's clothing without an automatic machine, hot running water, or the ability to complain publicly? What does a government pamphlet mean when it recommends serving an economical cut of meat to a household that currently owns no meat? How do you keep children warm, fed, clean, hopeful, and unaware that you have quietly stopped eating lunch? And how long can one woman continue saying, "We are managing," before the sentence becomes the principal structure holding up the house? Congratulations! You have just woken up in the United States. The year is 1933. Banks have failed, factories have closed, farms are being lost, and millions of people are searching for work. Somewhere nearby, an economist is explaining that confidence must be restored. You would like him to restore it after he has split the kindling. Let's begin with the morning, because hardship has thoughtfully arranged to wake before you do. The bedroom is cold when you open your eyes. Not pleasantly cool, not fresh, and certainly not the temperature selected by a small digital panel on the wall. It is the sort of cold that has entered the room during the night, inspected the blankets, and settled around your ankles personally. Beside you, your husband may already be awake, staring at the ceiling and thinking about work or the absence of it. The children are still quiet in the next room, which gives you several valuable minutes before anyone requires breakfast, clean socks, reassurance, or an explanation for why the milk bottle is nearly empty. You pull on a house dress, fasten an old sweater over it, and step onto the cold floor. The depression has begun another day, and as usual, it expects you to be downstairs first. There is no central heating humming politely behind the walls. If the house is warm at all, it will become warm because someone carries fuel, clears ashes, lights kindling, and persuades a stove to cooperate. That someone is usually you. Before warmth can exist, it must be manufactured by hand. You move quietly through the dark hallway, avoiding the loose floorboard near the children's room. Waking them early would be inefficient. Children who are asleep are not hungry, and during the Great Depression, a sleeping child is briefly one less item on the household budget. The kitchen smells faintly of yesterday's cooking, cold iron, damp cloth, and the ashes resting inside the stove. You strike a match. Matches are inexpensive, but inexpensive is not the same as free, so you shelter the flame carefully with one hand. It catches the paper, then the kindling, and finally the coal or wood arranged above it. Smoke hesitates in the stove before deciding to travel up the chimney. A small amount escapes into the room because the stove likes to begin each morning by reminding you who is actually in charge. While the fire strengthens, you check the kitchen. The bread is where you left it. The coffee tin feels lighter than you hoped. The milk bottle contains enough to create either 4 disappointing servings or 2 respectable ones, which means the children will receive the respectable ones. You will tell yourself that coffee is all you want. This is one of the quieter habits of depression motherhood. You become skilled at making your own hunger invisible. You eat the burnt edge, the heel of the loaf, the portion that is supposedly too small to save. You claim you tasted enough while cooking. You say your stomach is unsettled or that you are not hungry yet. Later may never arrive, but it remains a useful place to store meals you cannot afford in the present. Behind you, the house begins to stir. A bed frame creaks. Small feet touch the floor. Someone coughs. Your husband enters the kitchen wearing trousers, an undershirt, and the expression of a man preparing to ask the world for work again. For many men, unemployment is not merely a financial disaster. It feels like a personal failure, even when factories have closed, banks have collapsed, and thousands of equally willing men are standing in the same lines. The culture has spent years telling him that a good husband provides. Now the economy has removed his ability to provide, and left the expectation sitting there untouched. You recognize this, but there is little time to discuss it before breakfast. Feelings must wait until the oatmeal has been stretched. Perhaps he has heard that a warehouse is hiring. Perhaps a road crew needs 10 men, which means several hundred will arrive before sunrise. Perhaps he will walk from business to business, asking for work until the soles of his shoes wear thinner. He may return with wages, a promise, a rumour, or nothing at all. You do not tell him to remain hopeful. Hope has become another word people use when they have no practical information. Instead, you pour his coffee, place the least chipped cup in front of him, and ask whether he wants the last piece of toast. Soon the children appear, wrapped in sweaters and carrying the confused expressions of people who have been awake for 12 seconds and already expect full service. One needs help with a button. Another cannot find a sock. A third has remembered, at precisely this moment, that the teacher requested a pencil. You solve each crisis in order. The button is fastened. The missing sock is found beneath the bed. The pencil is sharpened down to a length that now requires ambition to hold. Outside, the sky is beginning to pale. Somewhere, shop doors are opening. Men are gathering near factory gates. Delivery trucks are rattling through cold streets. Across the country, millions of women are standing in kitchens much like yours, checking cupboards, warming rooms, and preparing families for another uncertain day. You lift the lid from the oatmeal pot and stir slowly. There may not be enough money. There may not be enough fuel. There may not be any good news waiting beyond the front door. But breakfast will be ready. For the moment, that is the closest thing the household has to certainty. Now you enter the kitchen and approach the stove. Depending on your home, it may burn coal, wood, kerosene, or gas. But whatever its fuel, it does not awaken through optimism alone. Yesterday's ashes must be cleared, kindling must be arranged, fuel must be added carefully because fuel costs money, and money has recently become shy. Soon the room fills with the dry scrape of the poker, the smell of soot, and the first weak warmth creeping from the iron. In winter, this stove is not merely an appliance. It is the household's furnace, water heater, cooking range, clothes dryer, and central object of worship. You stand before it with cold fingers, encouraging one reluctant flame to accept responsibility for 6 people. Modern kitchens speak gently when they are preheated. This one produces smoke and waits to see how committed you are. If yours is a coal or wood range, the day begins with the ash box. You open the small iron door beneath the fire chamber and find the remains of yesterday waiting in a soft grey mound. Fine ash rises immediately, coating your fingers, settling on your sleeves, and drifting toward the cleanest available surface with remarkable accuracy. You shovel it into a metal bucket and carry it carefully, because dropping hot ash onto a wooden floor is the sort of household mistake that creates an entirely new category of problems. The ashes themselves may still be useful. Nothing in a depression household is allowed to become waste merely because it has already been burned. Wood ash can be scattered on icy paths, used cautiously in gardens, or saved for household purposes familiar to rural families. Coal ash may help fill holes in muddy ground. Even the stove's remains are expected to continue contributing. Retirement is apparently unavailable to minerals. You crumple newspaper beneath thin pieces of kindling. If newspaper is scarce, you use scraps that have already been read, folded, saved, and judged unlikely to contain information more valuable than warmth. A headline about markets, elections, or distant political arguments disappears beneath the wood. National affairs are briefly converted into breakfast. The match catches. The paper curls black at the edges, and the first flame moves upward. You wait before adding larger pieces. Too much fuel too quickly can smother the fire. Too little allows it to die. The stove requires balance, patience, and constant attention, which means it has much in common with the rest of the household, though the stove is occasionally easier to reason with. Coal produces steady heat, but it is dirty. Wood is familiar and sometimes locally available, but it burns quickly and must be carried, cut, split, stacked, and kept dry. Kerosene stoves are convenient in warmer weather because they do not heat the entire kitchen as fiercely, though they bring their own sharp smell and the need for careful handling. Gas ranges are increasingly common in towns and cities, offering greater control, but gas service still appears on a bill, and the company has shown little interest in accepting gratitude as payment. Whatever the fuel, you learn its habits. You know which damper sticks, which burner runs hot, and which corner of the oven will blacken biscuits while the opposite corner considers them raw. There is no digital temperature display. Oven heat is judged through experience, by holding your hand near the opening, watching how flour browns, or relying on the temperament of a small thermometer if you own one. Recipes may instruct you to use a moderate oven, which is helpful in the same way that telling someone to maintain a sensible speed is helpful when the vehicle has no speedometer. Once the fire strengthens, you place a kettle on the stove. Hot water will be needed for coffee, oatmeal, washing dishes, cleaning faces, and perhaps laundry later. Every pan has a schedule. The stove's surface is arranged like a small industrial district, with each pot competing for the hottest position. In winter, damp mittens and socks may be draped nearby. A child's shoes sit close enough to dry but not close enough to scorch, though this distance is usually discovered through experience. Wet towels hang from a rail. The kitchen gradually becomes warmer, and family members begin drifting toward it, drawn by heat with the quiet instinct of house cats who contribute less to the fuel budget. By breakfast, your face is warm, your back is cold, and a faint line of soot has appeared across your forehead. The fire is finally steady. The kettle begins to mutter. The iron range clicks softly as it expands with heat. You have created warmth from ash, paper, splinters, and stubbornness. The stove has agreed to cooperate for now. It would like you to understand that this agreement is temporary. With the fire beginning to hold, you can think about washing. In a prosperous urban home, there may be indoor plumbing and a bathroom, though prosperity has become a somewhat historical condition. In a poorer apartment, rural farmhouse, or temporary dwelling, water may still arrive through a pump, a shared tap, a well, or a bucket carried farther than water has any right to travel. You pour a little into an enamel basin and warm it if there is enough fuel. Faces and hands come first because they are the parts most likely to be inspected by teachers, shopkeepers, neighbours, and God. A full bath requires planning, heating, carrying, and the temporary conversion of the kitchen into a municipal water department, Cleanliness remains a moral expectation even when hot water is a luxury. Society has lost its savings, but it still has standards. You set the basin on a washstand or kitchen chair and test the water with your fingers. It is not hot. Hot would require more fuel, more time, and another kettle. It is merely less cold than it was before, which is the household definition of luxury. A bar of soap rests in a small dish nearby. Perhaps it is store-bought, used carefully until it becomes a thin, translucent sliver. Perhaps it is homemade from lye and saved fat, especially in a rural household where waste grease can be transformed into something useful and mildly threatening. Homemade soap cleans effectively, though it may be harsh enough to leave your hands feeling as though they have been formally corrected. You begin with your face and neck, rubbing the cloth over skin still creased from sleep, then your arms and hands. A proper daily wash often focuses on the visible areas, particularly when water must be carried and heated. You clean what the world will see first. The remaining parts of the body must wait for a more ambitious appointment. Soon the children arrive one by one. Each is washed according to temperament. One submits quietly, another insists the water is freezing, even though it is the same temperature everyone else has survived. A smaller child twists away from the cloth with the strength and moral conviction of someone escaping an unlawful arrest. You wipe faces, scrub behind ears, and inspect fingernails. The area behind the ears holds a peculiar place in family hygiene. It is rarely visible, seldom discussed outside childhood, and somehow treated as the final measure of civilization. The same basin may serve several people, with fresh water added when possible and complete replacement when necessary. Modern ideas about each person receiving a private stream of heated water would seem magnificent and slightly wasteful. Water has weight. Every gallon carried inside must later be carried out again, unless a drain or plumbing system has spared you part of the journey. If your house has a bathtub, using it may still require planning. Many bathrooms are unheated, which means winter bathing involves removing your clothes in a room that feels personally offended by exposed skin. In homes without plumbing, a galvanized tub may be brought into the kitchen and placed near the stove. Water is heated in kettles and pots, poured in, tested, adjusted, and guarded against cooling. The family may bathe in sequence, beginning with whoever is considered most deserving of clean water and moving steadily toward whoever is expected to show the greatest character. The exact order varies by family. The water does not improve as the process continues. Bath night may take place once a week rather than every day. Between full baths, washcloths, basins, clean underclothing, and careful attention to visible skin maintain respectability. Hair washing is another undertaking. Long hair requires time to dry, and in winter, damp hair can leave you sitting near the stove for hours while performing other tasks with your head angled toward the heat. Laundry adds another demand. The water used for washing clothing must be heated, poured into tubs, mixed with soap, and managed before it cools. White garments may be boiled, stains are rubbed by hand. Water that begins clean gradually turns grey, then receives a second career for scrubbing floors or washing something less particular. Nothing as useful as warm water is permitted to perform only one task. By the time the family is washed, the basin contains a faint ring of soap, the towels are damp, and the kitchen floor has collected several small puddles. Everyone looks cleaner. You look as though you have supervised a minor flood. You empty the basin, dry the children, and hang the cloths where the stove's heat may reach them. The room smells of soap, damp cotton, and warming iron. There is still no shower, no endless hot water, and no fluffy towel waiting on a heated rail. But the faces are clean, the ears have been inspected, and society may continue for another day. It is breakfast, and the first ingredient is calculation. You look at the oatmeal, cornmeal, bread, potatoes, eggs, or whatever remains from yesterday, and begin dividing it into portions before anything reaches the table. A little more for the child who is growing, enough for the person leaving to seek work, less for yourself because you can eat later, which is a useful sentence when later is kept deliberately vague. Across the country, depression breakfasts vary by region and circumstance, but economy is the common seasoning. Cornmeal mush may be fried from yesterday's leftovers. Stale bread may be toasted into respectability. Potatoes can return in a skillet with such confidence that everyone agrees not to mention seeing them at supper. You are not merely preparing food. You are persuading scarcity to sit down and behave like a meal. The oatmeal goes into the pot with more water than the instructions would ideally recommend. Instructions are written for households operating under stable economic conditions and are therefore treated as a starting point rather than law. You stir slowly, watching the mixture thicken, then add another splash of water because 4 bowls have somehow become 6. If there is milk, it is measured carefully. The children receive theirs first. A small amount may be added to the oatmeal to make it look richer, though most of the richness is visual. You save enough for the youngest child, who still needs it most, and perhaps a little for coffee. Your own bowl receives none. You have recently discovered that you prefer oatmeal plain, particularly when preference is the only ingredient available in unlimited supply. Sugar is another question. A spoonful would make the porridge more appealing, but sugar costs money and disappears quickly. You may sweeten the children's bowls with molasses, preserves, sliced fruit, or a little brown sugar saved for this purpose. If none of those are available, you add cinnamon and speak warmly about how good it smells. Children are surprisingly willing to accept economic policy when it is presented as a special recipe. Bread is cut into thin slices. The knife moves carefully because a thick slice given to one person becomes a visible political issue for everyone else. You toast it near the stove, then scrape away any blackened edges. Burnt bread is not thrown out, it is corrected. Butter, if you have it, is spread so thinly that the knife mainly introduces the idea of butter to the surface. Margarine, drippings, jam, or bacon grease may do the work instead. Bacon grease stored in a jar beside the stove is particularly valuable. It can fry potatoes, flavour beans, enrich cornbread, and persuade vegetables that meat has recently passed through the neighbourhood. Eggs are a luxury in some homes and a regular resource in others, particularly on farms where hens continue laying without consulting the banking system. Even then, eggs may be sold or traded rather than eaten. Cash from a dozen eggs can buy flour, salt, or lamp oil. Breakfast becomes a negotiation between nourishment now and necessities later. Perhaps you crack 1 egg into a bowl, add water or milk, beat it thoroughly, and divide it among several children. Each receives a small yellow portion and the impression that an egg has been served. You call it scrambled eggs. The plural is generous but emotionally useful. For families with even less, breakfast may be bread and weak coffee, cornmeal mush, biscuits with gravy, leftover beans, or nothing at all. In farming regions struck by drought, the pantry may depend on relief supplies, garden produce, or food exchanged with neighbours. In city apartments, women stretch groceries bought on credit from a shopkeeper who has already stretched his own patience. Relief agencies sometimes distribute flour, beans, lard, canned goods, powdered milk, or surplus farm products. These supplies can keep a family alive, though they do not always arrive in combinations that make obvious meals. You may receive a great deal of one item and almost none of another. This requires imagination. If the household receives several bags of beans, beans become breakfast, lunch, supper, and eventually a topic nobody is permitted to mention. You place the bowls on the table, everyone sits. The children may complain that the oatmeal is thin. Your husband may eat quickly because a hiring line is already forming somewhere. You remind one child not to waste the crust and another to finish the milk. Every spoonful has cost money, work, credit, pride, or all 4. You keep moving while the others eat. You wipe the counter, pack a lunch, refill a cup, and claim you will sit down in a moment. By the time you finally do, the pot holds only a small portion clinging to the sides. You scrape it into your bowl and add hot water. It is not much, but it is warm. Everyone else has eaten. The arithmetic has worked again, provided nobody asks what happened to your share. Beside the breakfast pan, the coffee pot is performing its own act of endurance. Fresh grounds are desirable, but fresh grounds cost money, so yesterday's grounds may receive a small addition and another opportunity to contribute. Chicory, roasted grain, or other substitutes can stretch the supply, depending on what is available and what your family is willing to call coffee before sunrise. The resulting drink may be pale, bitter, and emotionally distant from the bean that inspired it, but it is hot, and hot things have authority in a cold kitchen. You pour the adults' cups and perhaps add milk, if the milk is not already reserved for the children. Nobody describes the coffee as weak. It has been through enough. You simply drink it slowly and allow it to remind you that not every disappointment requires a formal discussion. Coffee has become one of those small comforts that the household is reluctant to surrender completely. Meat can disappear from the table. New clothing can be postponed. Vacations can be placed in the same category as private airplanes. But the morning cup carries habit, warmth, and the memory of more secure years. Giving it up would feel like allowing the depression to enter one room too many. So you stretch it. The grounds from yesterday remain in the pot or percolator, dark and swollen after their first useful life. You add a spoonful of fresh coffee if the tin permits, then perhaps chicory, roasted barley, wheat, rye, or another commercial substitute designed to provide darkness and bitterness at a lower price. Some mixtures are sold ready-made. Others are created at home through experiment, necessity, and a willingness to redefine success. You pour in water and set the pot over the heat. Soon it begins to bubble with the determined sound of something trying to appear stronger than it is. The smell still fills the kitchen, though it is thinner than you remember. Aroma is generous that way. It can suggest abundance long after the cupboard has stopped cooperating. For a few moments the room smells almost normal. Your husband wraps both hands around his cup. He may be leaving to search for work, report to a relief project, or stand outside a factory gate with dozens of other men. The coffee gives him something warm to hold while the day makes up its mind about him. You may sit opposite him for a minute. Although sitting is temporary, there are lunches to pack, children to organise, and dishes already considering their future. The two of you drink quietly. This silence is not empty. It contains the rent, the grocery balance, the worn soles of his shoes, and the question of whether someone will hire him today. It contains everything neither of you wants to place directly on the breakfast table beside the oatmeal. The coffee allows conversation without requiring words. In homes where even substitutes are too expensive, people improvise further. Roasted grains, bran, acorns, peas, sweet potatoes, or other ingredients may be ground and brewed into dark drinks that imitate coffee in appearance and general intention. Some are traditional regional beverages. Others are acts of economic desperation served in cups. The important feature is often not the flavour. It is the ritual. You pour. You stir. You raise the cup. For 10 minutes the household behaves as it always has. If there is sugar, you measure it carefully. 1 spoonful may disappear into your husband's cup before you decide yours is fine without it. Milk or cream is even more guarded. Children need milk. Adults, according to the logic of difficult times, can apparently survive on responsibility. You may drink your coffee black and claim that you have come to prefer it that way. Depression households discover many new preferences immediately after the preferred alternative becomes unaffordable. The children may be allowed a cup of warm milk, cocoa, or a very diluted portion of coffee depending on family custom. Older children sometimes drink coffee regularly, especially when it is largely hot water wearing a brown disguise. Everyone learns early that a beverage does not need to be excellent to deserve gratitude. When the pot is empty, you do not necessarily throw the grounds away. They may be brewed once more later, added to compost, scattered in the garden, or used for some household purpose inherited from a mother, neighbour, or newspaper column. Waste is treated almost as a moral offence. The coffee tin itself will remain useful long after its label has faded. It may hold buttons, nails, grease, seeds, string, or coins. Containers in your kitchen do not die. They simply change professions. You rinse the cups sparingly and set them upside down to dry. At the bottom of yours is a small dark sediment, the final evidence of whatever mixture passed through the pot this morning. It was not good coffee, but it was warm, it was shared, and for a few quiet minutes it made the kitchen feel less uncertain. During the Great Depression, that is enough to earn another brewing tomorrow. Now you prepare a lunch for anyone fortunate enough to have somewhere to carry it. A factory shift, road crew, shop counter, railway yard, or relief project may still provide wages, though employment can disappear between breakfast and supper with very little ceremony. Into the pail goes a sandwich, perhaps made with egg, cheese, leftover meat, jam, or something spread thinly enough to qualify as an idea. There may be an apple, a piece of cake if Sunday was generous, or a jar of soup wrapped carefully against spilling. Your husband may say little while putting on his coat. Work has become tied so closely to dignity that losing one can feel like losing the other, and you are expected to protect both without appearing to notice. You hand him the lunch pail. It is not full, exactly, but neither is the conversation. The lunch pail itself may be a proper metal container with a fitted lid, dented from years of factory floors and railway yards. It may be an old tin repurposed for the job, a paper parcel tied with string, or a small basket lined with cloth. Like most household objects during the Depression, it has already enjoyed one career and is now performing another without complaint. You look through the pantry for something that can survive several hours without refrigeration. A sandwich is the obvious answer, although the word sandwich covers a wide range of economic conditions. There may be cold meat from Sunday dinner, sliced so thinly that sunlight could probably pass through it. There may be egg mashed with a little salt, cheese, peanut butter, jam, or bacon grease spread across bread for flavour and strength. Perhaps there is no filling at all beyond leftover gravy soaked carefully into the bread. You wrap it in waxed paper and hope the two slices remain committed to each other until noon. Bread must be chosen carefully. Fresh bread is best, but yesterday's loaf is what you have. If it has dried slightly, you soften it with butter, drippings, or a damp cloth placed nearby while it warms. If one edge has gone hard, you trim it and save the pieces for crumbs. Nothing is discarded simply because it has become difficult. A jar of soup or stew may be packed if the worker has somewhere to warm it. Otherwise, cold potatoes, biscuits, cornbread, hard-boiled eggs, or leftover beans may fill the space. A thermos is useful if your family owns one, though it is also breakable, expensive to replace, and therefore handled with the respect usually reserved for scientific equipment. You may tuck in a small pickle, an onion, or a piece of fruit. Apples travel well and provide the reassuring shape of a complete food. An orange is a greater luxury. A banana is less reliable and has a tendency to arrive at lunchtime as evidence. The lunch should be filling enough to support physical work. Men digging roads, lifting freight, laying track, cutting timber, or working factory machinery need more than a decorative sandwich and encouraging note. But the household supply cannot always meet the appetite the work creates. You add another slice of bread when possible. Bread is cheaper than meat and more willing to multiply. For men employed through New Deal relief programs, the lunch may be carried to a road project, park, school construction site, or public building. Programs such as the Works Progress Administration provide wages to millions, while the Civilian Conservation Corps employs mostly young, unmarried men in camps far from home. These jobs are often exhausting, but they restore income, routine, and some measure of confidence. Even so, relief work can carry a social sting. Some people speak of government employment as charity, usually while standing near a road, bridge, park, or school built by the men receiving it. Your husband may be grateful for the wages and still dislike the implication that he has failed. You understand this contradiction. You also understand that the grocer accepts relief wages without a philosophical objection. Before he leaves, you check the lid twice. A leaking soup jar can turn a lunch pail into a small metal swamp before 9 in the morning. You wrap the bottle in cloth, place the sandwich above it, and tuck the apple into the corner. Perhaps you include a folded scrap of paper with a reminder, a grocery request, or simply a few kind words. You do not write anything dramatic. Married affection during difficult times is often practical. Remember the coal. Ask about Saturday. Be careful coming home. At the door, he pulls on his cap and lifts the pail. You tell him the lunch is better than it looks. He tells you he is not very hungry anyway. Both of you participate in this small exchange of lies because they are kinder than the truth. Then he steps outside. By evening he may return with wages, news of another shift, or word that the work has ended. The factory may reduce hours, the crew may be dismissed, the shop may close. Employment during the Depression can disappear without warning, taking the lunch hour, the paycheck, and a portion of a man's certainty with it. You watch him walk away carrying the pail. Inside it are 2 sandwiches, an apple, and nearly all the hope the kitchen could spare. Once the adults are fed, the children must be assembled. One child wears a shirt that belonged to an older brother, who inherited it from a cousin, who may have received it from a neighbour with unusually durable elbows. Hems have been lowered. Sleeves have been lengthened with contrasting cloth. Shoes are stuffed, resoled, exchanged, and worn until the leather begins making independent decisions. You inspect collars, smooth hair, and wipe a mark from someone's cheek with the corner of a damp cloth. Children still go to school when they can, carrying books, lunches, and a keen awareness of which classmates have begun arriving without either. You want yours to look neat, not because neatness solves poverty, but because it prevents poverty from introducing itself before they do. A clean collar can carry a remarkable amount of family pride. You stand the youngest child near the window where the morning light is strongest and inspect the knees of his trousers. One patch is holding. The other has begun curling at the edge, suggesting that it would prefer a less demanding position. You fetch the sewing basket, thread a needle, and make several quick stitches while he shifts from one foot to the other and explains that everyone else is probably already on the way to school. This is almost certainly untrue. Still, lateness matters. Teachers expect children to arrive clean, prepared, and reasonably awake. Even when the household has spent the morning negotiating with a stove, a nearly empty pantry, and one missing shoe. Poverty may explain many things, but it rarely suspends the school bell. Clothing passes through families with an efficiency that would impress any modern recycling campaign. A girl's dress may begin as her older sister's Sunday best, become an ordinary school dress, lose its decorative trim, acquire a new hem, and eventually be cut into pieces for a younger child. When it can no longer function as clothing, it may become an apron, quilt square, cleaning cloth, or patch for something that still has employment ahead of it. Nothing simply wears out. It descends through the household hierarchy until even its threads have duties. You turn collars when the outer edge becomes frayed, placing the worn side underneath where it cannot be seen. You replace missing buttons with the nearest available match. Sometimes the nearest available match is not especially near in appearance. A brown button joins 3 white ones and is accepted as a family eccentricity. Coats are more difficult. A good winter coat is expensive, and children have the inconsiderate habit of growing. You let out seams, move buttons, lengthen sleeves with bands of fabric, and tell yourself that the contrasting cuffs look intentional. Perhaps they do. Fashion has always relied partly on confidence and partly on nobody asking too many questions. Shoes create the greatest anxiety. Cardboard may be placed inside to cover a hole in the sole, though it softens quickly in rain. Newspaper can add warmth or improve the fit of a pair inherited slightly too soon. Soles are repaired repeatedly by a cobbler if there is money, or patched at home if there is not. A child whose shoes leak may still walk to school through snow or cold rain. You rub grease into the leather, tie the laces securely, and hope the weather respects your workmanship. It will not, but hope remains free. School itself provides routine, education, and sometimes food. Some communities organize lunch programs, while charities, churches, parent groups, and relief agencies help children who arrive hungry. Teachers learn to recognize the child who watches another pupil's lunch too closely or saves half a sandwich for a younger sibling at home. Not every child attends regularly. Some stay home because there are no proper clothes, no shoes, no transportation, or because their labor is needed. Older daughters may care for younger children while their mother works. Sons may take temporary jobs, deliver newspapers, gather coal, sell small goods, or help on farms. Education is valued, but immediate survival has a habit of placing itself first on the schedule. Your children understand more than you want them to. They notice when classmates leave town because a family has lost its home. They notice which desks remain empty. They know not to ask for new notebooks unless the old ones have been used to the final line. They learn to write between earlier sums, erase carefully, and treat a pencil stub as though it were a family heirloom. Before they leave, you look them over once more. Hair combed, faces clean, buttons mostly cooperative, lunch is wrapped. The eldest carries books beneath one arm and holds the youngest by the hand. You remind them to come straight home, keep their clothes clean, and avoid puddles. They promise all three with the casual confidence of people who have not yet met the road. Then they step outside wearing cousins, siblings, flour sacks, old coats, new patches, and every bit of dignity you could stitch together before 8 o'clock. After the door closes behind the children, you turn toward the pantry. This is where the household economy reveals itself honestly. There may be flour, cornmeal, beans, rice, potatoes, lard, canned tomatoes, preserves, onions, and a piece of salt pork that has been given more responsibilities than most elected officials. Nothing is merely stored. Everything is assigned a future. Bacon grease waits in a jar for frying. Stale bread will become crumbs, pudding, stuffing, or toast. Bones will become broth. Vegetable peelings may flavour soup before reaching the garden or animals. A modern pantry contains options. Yours contains commitments. You take inventory without writing much down because you already know the location, quantity, and emotional significance of every item. The half cup of sugar behind the tea tin is not food, it is strategic reserve. You begin with the flour bin. You lift the lid, look inside, and judge the remaining amount by eye. Perhaps there is enough for biscuits, thickening gravy, and one batch of bread if nothing goes wrong. Something will go wrong. Flour has a way of disappearing faster when money is low, possibly because every economical recipe begins by asking for 2 cups of it. Cornmeal is more dependable. It can become mush, cornbread, dumplings, coating for fried food, or a thickener for meals that have lost confidence. Beans are equally valuable. They are cheap, filling, nutritious, and patient enough to sit in a pot for hours while becoming supper. Their only weakness is that a family can identify beans even when you rename them. You examine the potatoes next. A few have begun sprouting. This does not make them useless. It merely means the potatoes have developed personal ambitions. You cut away the sprouts and any green or spoiled portions, keeping what remains. One potato can be sliced into soup, grated into cakes, mashed with another vegetable, or fried with onions to suggest that breakfast was planned rather than assembled under pressure. The onions are softening, so they move higher on the schedule. Pantry management is partly a race against spoilage. Foods do not wait politely for the day you intended to use them. They become urgent without notice. You learn to inspect, smell, trim, soak, and rearrange meals according to which ingredient appears closest to making a regrettable decision. Nothing edible is thrown away casually. Bread heels collect in a covered tin. Once dried, they can be grated or crushed into crumbs. Crumbs thicken meatloaves, coat croquettes, stretch casseroles, and make a very small quantity of meat appear to have acquired staff. Stale bread may also become bread pudding, French toast, stuffing, or a pan of baked bread and milk sweetened with molasses or preserves. This is one of the household's great tricks. Yesterday's failure can often be served tomorrow with cinnamon. Fats are guarded carefully. Bacon grease, meat drippings, lard, and chicken fat are poured into jars or crocks and saved near the stove. They add flavour, prevent sticking, enrich dough, and reduce the need to buy butter. You strain the grease through cloth if necessary, and keep different types separate when you can. There are limits. Fish fat does not belong in pie crust, regardless of how firmly the household economy argues otherwise. Bones are boiled until they surrender everything useful. A beef bone, chicken carcass, or ham bone may return to the pot more than once, surrounded by onions, beans, cabbage, or potatoes. The first broth tastes of meat, the second tastes of memory. By the third, the bone is mainly attending as a respected elder. Vegetable scraps are treated according to their condition. Clean onion skins, celery leaves, carrot ends, and parsley stems can help flavour stock. Potato peelings may be fried or baked if scrubbed and sound. Wilted vegetables join soup. Bruised fruit becomes sauce, cobbler, jam, or stewed fruit. Anything truly spoiled goes to chickens, pigs, compost, or the rubbish, though you inspect it first with the concentration of a physician reluctant to declare the patient lost. Canning jars line the shelves if the previous summer was generous. Tomatoes, beans, peaches, berries, pickles, relishes, and preserves bring colour into the pantry. Each jar represents hours of washing, peeling, boiling, lifting, sealing, and sweating in a kitchen, already warm enough to concern geology. You check the seals and inspect the contents carefully. A failed seal, leaking jar, unusual odour, or bulging lid is dangerous, not merely disappointing. Food preservation keeps families fed, but improper canning can cause serious illness. Economy does not make spoiled food safe, although hunger can make it harder to discard. At the back of the shelf sit the protected items: sugar for birthdays, illness, or canning, cocoa for a rare treat, a jar of preserves saved for company. Perhaps coffee rationed by the spoonful, though formal wartime rationing is still several years away. These are not everyday foods. They are household morale in containers. You close the pantry door and begin planning lunch and supper. Beans must soak. The soft onions must be used. The stale bread has reached the pudding stage of its career. There is no abundance inside the pantry. But nothing is idle, nothing is forgotten, and almost nothing has finished working yet. Soon you sit at the kitchen table with a stub of pencil, a scrap of paper, and the week's money. The coins are arranged in small groups for rent, fuel, milk, bread, and emergencies, though the emergency category has become ambitious. Grocery shopping during the Depression means comparing prices by the ounce, knowing which store extends credit, and understanding exactly how long a shopkeeper's patience can be stretched before it becomes humiliation. Chain stores may offer lower prices. Neighborhood grocers may know your family and allow a balance to remain in the ledger until payday. You erase meat, you reduce butter, you reconsider soap. The list becomes shorter while the week remains the same length. This is household budgeting without a spreadsheet, except the spreadsheet is a kitchen table and one of its columns is hunger. You count the coins again, as though they might have reproduced while resting near the sugar bowl. They have not. Money during the Depression is extremely disciplined in this respect. A few cents are set aside for milk. Children need milk, doctors say, and newspaper columns repeat it with the confidence of people who do not have to stand in your kitchen and locate the milk money. Bread comes next. Flour may be cheaper if you bake at home, but baking requires yeast, fuel, time, and a household willing to eat the result even when the oven behaves unpredictably. You write flour. Then you stare at the word for a moment and add cornmeal beneath it. Cornmeal is cheaper, dependable, and capable of appearing at almost every meal without requiring an introduction. Meat is more complicated. A roast belongs to better times or Sunday company. Bacon provides flavour but disappears quickly. Salt pork lasts longer and can lend authority to beans, greens, soups and potatoes. A small amount of ground beef might become meatloaf if stretched with breadcrumbs, oatmeal, onions or crackers. The meat itself can occupy a modest role, while the filler performs most of the physical labour. You write 1 pound. Then you cross it out and write half. Butter receives similar treatment. Margarine, lard, drippings or bacon grease can manage many of its duties. Butter is pleasant, certainly, but pleasant things have recently been asked to justify themselves before the household committee. Soap stays on the list because clothing, dishes, floors, faces and social respectability all depend on it. Yet even soap is divided into categories. Laundry soap, hand soap, washing powder, and cleaning compounds compete for the same coins. You may buy a large bar and cut it into smaller pieces, grate it into hot water for laundry and save every softened remnant. When several slivers remain, you press them together into one misshapen new bar. It looks less like soap and more like a geological sample, but it continues working. You also consider where to shop. The neighbourhood grocer knows your name, your children, and perhaps the exact amount your husband still owes from last month. He may allow you to buy on credit, recording each item in a ledger behind the counter. This can preserve a family through a difficult week, but every purchase deepens the balance. Standing at the counter while he writes the amount can feel strangely public, even if nobody else is listening. You study the canned goods while pretending not to notice the pencil moving. Chain stores often sell staples at lower prices. Their displays are larger, their methods more standardized, and their willingness to discuss your personal circumstances considerably smaller. Cash purchases may save money, provided you possess cash, which is where the system has introduced a rather important condition. You may visit several shops. Flour is cheaper at one, milk costs less at another. A butcher may sell soup bones, liver, neck pieces, or other inexpensive cuts near closing time. A market stall may reduce bruised fruit that can still be cooked into sauce. The savings are measured in pennies, but pennies are now active participants in family survival. Coupons are clipped from newspapers when available. Advertisements are read closely. A sale on canned tomatoes can change the week's menu. A lower price on beans may feel almost festive, though this is partly because your standards for festivity have adjusted. You finish the list, then read it from top to bottom. Flour, cornmeal, beans, milk, soap, onions, salt pork if cheap, coffee, only if possible. The phrase "if possible" has become one of your most frequently purchased household items. You fold the paper and place the coins into a worn purse. There is enough for food perhaps, provided nobody becomes ill, nothing breaks, the fuel lasts, and the prices remain where they were yesterday. It is not a generous budget. It is a narrow bridge across 7 days, and you are about to walk the entire family over it carrying groceries. When private economy is no longer enough, relief may become necessary. You put on your best available coat, gather whatever documents or references are required, and enter an office where need must be explained to strangers. Before the New Deal expanded federal involvement, much assistance came through local governments, churches, charities, and private agencies, each with its own rules and opinions. Later programs bring broader support, work relief, surplus food, and new layers of paperwork. The help can be life-saving. Receiving it can also feel exposing in a culture that treats self-reliance as evidence of character and poverty, as though it might result from insufficient enthusiasm. You answer questions about income, savings, relatives, rent, and food. Apparently hunger is private, but qualifying for flour requires a committee. The waiting room is already crowded when you arrive. Men sit with hats resting between their hands. Mothers hold tired children on their laps. Elderly couples speak quietly over documents folded and unfolded so many times that the creases have begun dividing the paper into districts. Nobody wishes to be here. That is one of the first things everyone understands about everyone else. You take a seat and wait for your name. There may be a smell of wet wool, floor polish, coal smoke, and bodies that have spent too long inside winter coats. A clerk works behind a desk stacked with forms. Another person moves through the room asking questions in a voice intended to sound efficient rather than unkind. Your turn eventually arrives. You explain when your husband last worked, how much he earned, and why the wages stopped. You list the rent, the children, the food remaining in the house, and any relatives who might theoretically help. The word theoretically is important. A brother in Ohio may exist, but existence and available money are not the same condition. You may be asked whether you own a car, radio, sewing machine, livestock, furniture, insurance policy, or anything else that could be sold. Possessions acquired in better years can now be treated as evidence that you are not yet sufficiently poor. The radio may be the family's only entertainment and source of news. The sewing machine may be how you earn a few cents. The car may no longer run. Still, every object must explain why it remains in your home while you request assistance. A caseworker may visit the house to confirm your circumstances. You know the visit is necessary from the agency's point of view. You also know that a stranger will open cupboards, inspect beds, count family members, and observe the condition of the rooms. Naturally, you clean before the investigator arrives. This creates a delicate problem. If the house looks neglected, you may be judged careless. If it looks too orderly, someone may quietly wonder whether you truly need help. You must present respectable poverty. The floor should be swept but not suspiciously prosperous. Early in the Depression, local relief systems become overwhelmed. Cities and counties lose tax revenue at the exact moment thousands of families need support. Churches, settlement houses, mutual aid groups and charities distribute meals, coal, clothing and grocery orders, but donations cannot match the scale of unemployment. Federal involvement grows after Franklin Roosevelt takes office in 1933. Programs such as the Federal Emergency Relief Administration send money to states for direct aid and work relief. Other agencies create public jobs building roads, schools, parks, drainage systems, and public buildings. Your family may receive grocery vouchers, fuel, rent assistance, clothing, or surplus commodities rather than cash. Flour, beans, canned meat, powdered milk, butter, or other farm products may arrive through relief channels. The contents depend on location, program, and availability. You are grateful for every item. You are also expected to transform an unusual collection of supplies into meals that appear normal. 5 pounds of dried beans and a large quantity of flour are useful, but they do suggest that the coming week has selected a theme. Direct relief remains controversial. Public officials worry that too much assistance will weaken initiative, as though a man standing in line before dawn for one day's labour has simply lacked the idea of trying. Work relief is often preferred because it provides wages in exchange for public labour and preserves a sense of independence. But work programs do not solve every household problem. Jobs may be temporary, pay can be low. Women, black families, immigrants and rural communities may encounter discrimination or unequal access. Local administrators still possess considerable power, and local prejudice has survived the banking crisis with excellent health. Eventually your application is approved, delayed, reduced, or passed to another desk. Perhaps you leave with a grocery order and instructions to return next week. Perhaps a coal delivery will be arranged. Perhaps your husband's name will be added to a work list. You fold the papers carefully and step back outside. The help will keep the children fed and the stove burning. That matters more than pride, though pride has accompanied you home anyway. Tomorrow, You will carry flour through the front door and call it groceries. Today, you have learned that even desperation must arrive properly documented. Back at home, advice may arrive through a newspaper column, women's magazine, home economist, agricultural extension agent, radio program, or government pamphlet explaining how to maintain nutrition on a reduced budget. The suggestions are often practical. Use cheaper cuts, combine cereals and milk, plant vegetables, waste nothing. Cook slowly. The difficulty is that even economical food requires money, land, fuel, time, equipment, and a family willing to eat another serving of beans without beginning a constitutional debate. Still, you read carefully. Home economists during the Depression genuinely tried to help families preserve health under severe pressure, and their recipes could be inventive, disciplined, and useful. They could also possess the serene confidence of advice written by someone whose pantry had agreed to cooperate. You circle a recipe requiring one inexpensive egg. The egg, regrettably, remains theoretical. The pamphlet may have arrived through a county extension office, relief agency, school, church group, or visiting home demonstration agent. Its cover shows a cheerful table, a neatly dressed mother, and several children looking delighted by cabbage. Everyone in the illustration appears well rested. No one has asked whether there will be enough coal for Thursday. Inside, the pages explain the food groups, household budgeting, economical menus, and the importance of serving balanced meals. Milk builds strong bones. Leafy vegetables provide vitamins. Eggs are excellent for growing children. Meat contributes protein and iron. These are all sensible observations. They are also beginning to sound like a list of people who declined your invitation. You examine a sample weekly menu. Monday offers cereal, milk, toast, and fruit for breakfast. Lunch includes vegetable soup and sandwiches. Supper recommends liver, mashed potatoes, greens, bread, and baked apples. The whole arrangement is inexpensive according to the calculations printed beneath it. You perform your own calculation. The pamphlet has priced the milk lower than your grocer does, assumed the garden is producing, and included liver as though the butcher distributes it as a public service. It also believes you possess baked apples. Your kitchen currently possesses one apple, and it is being saved for a child who has developed a cough. Still, there are useful ideas. Dried beans can replace part of the meat in a meal. Powdered milk can be added to soups, bread dough, cereal, and sauces when relief supplies provide it. Whole grains, potatoes, cabbage, onions, carrots, and seasonal vegetables offer nourishment at relatively low cost. Tough cuts of meat become tender through slow cooking, provided there is enough fuel to maintain a slow fire for several hours. Every economical recommendation contains a hidden expense somewhere. Slow cooking saves money on meat but uses fuel. Baking bread saves money at the store but consumes flour, yeast, and heat. Gardening saves on vegetables but requires land, seed, tools, water, and months in which nothing attacks the plants with greater enthusiasm than your family intends to eat them. The home economist understands these difficulties better than the cheerful drawings suggest. Many women working in extension services and public programs visit rural homes, teach canning and food preservation, demonstrate low-cost recipes, and help families use unfamiliar relief commodities. They know that nutrition is not simply a matter of telling a mother to buy spinach. You may attend a demonstration at a schoolhouse or community hall. A table is arranged at the front with bowls, measuring cups, sample foods, and a woman who can produce 6 servings from ingredients that appear capable of feeding 3. This earns your attention. She shows you how to combine beans with cornmeal, stretch ground meat with oatmeal, use powdered milk in baking, and prepare vegetables without boiling every useful quality into the water. She recommends saving the cooking liquid for soup or gravy. You make a note of this. Water that has met a carrot is apparently no longer permitted to leave without further employment. At home, you try one of the recipes. Perhaps it is a bean loaf, vegetable casserole, cornmeal pudding, or creamed dish served over toast. You measure carefully, substitute what you lack, and make one further substitution after discovering that the first substitute is also unavailable. The finished meal does not resemble the photograph. The photograph has professional lighting and appears not to have been cooked in your oven. You carry it to the table anyway. The children stare. Your husband takes a portion and asks with admirable caution what it is. You give the dish its official name. Nobody is reassured. Yet they eat. The meal is warm, filling, and more nutritious than it appears. One child even asks for another helping, although this may be because the toast beneath it remains recognizable. After supper, you fold the pamphlet and place it beside the cookbooks. You will use it again. Some of its advice is optimistic. Some of it assumes a household with resources you do not have. But hidden among the cheerful menus are real techniques that may stretch tomorrow's food a little farther. The government pamphlet has not solved poverty. It has, however, found one more way to serve beans. Now it is wash day, a phrase that sounds wholesome until you meet the equipment. Clothing, sheets, towels, and undergarments must be sorted, soaked, scrubbed, boiled, rinsed, wrung, carried, and hung. An electric washing machine may exist in a better equipped home, but many households rely on tubs, washboards, hand wringers, and water heated on the stove. Even machines require lifting, feeding garments through rollers, and keeping curious fingers away from machinery designed before consumer comfort became a serious concern. Steam dampens the kitchen. Soap stings small cracks in your hands. Wet sheets become surprisingly committed to gravity. By noon, you have moved enough water to qualify as local infrastructure, and the family will demonstrate its appreciation by wearing clothes again tomorrow. The work begins long before the first shirt reaches the tub. Water must be carried, heated, and divided according to purpose. The cleanest water is reserved for the first load. Less particular items wait until later. White clothing may be soaked overnight, rubbed with soap, and boiled in a large copper or galvanized wash boiler on the stove. You stir the clothes with a wooden stick because reaching into boiling water with your hands has been judged unnecessarily ambitious. The washboard stands inside the tub, its ridged metal surface waiting to remove dirt, stains, and several layers of skin. You press each garment against it and scrub. Collars receive special attention. So do cuffs, knees, and the mysterious marks children produce without ever recalling how they happened. Soap may come as a large commercial bar washing powder or a homemade mixture containing lye. You grate the bar into the hot water and stir until it dissolves. The smell is sharp and clean, though clean in this case means strong enough to challenge the wallpaper. Homemade lye soap is effective but harsh. It strips grease from clothing and moisture from hands with equal enthusiasm. By winter, the skin across your knuckles may crack and redden. You keep working because wash day does not offer medical leave. If the household owns a washing machine, the labour changes rather than disappears. Early electric machines can agitate the clothes, saving some scrubbing, but you still fill and drain the tub manually in many models. The machine may stand on legs in the kitchen or back porch, shaking and humming while exposed belts, gears, and wringers operate nearby. The wringer consists of 2 rollers that squeeze water from each garment. You feed the cloth between them, turn a crank or guide the motorized mechanism, and catch the flattened result on the other side. Buttons must be positioned carefully. Fingers must be positioned even more carefully. The machine has no interest in distinguishing between a bedsheet and your hand. Children are warned to stay back. They immediately come closer to observe. A sheet enters the rollers in a wet bundle and emerges as a long compressed ribbon. If it catches crookedly, it may wrap around the roller, strain the fabric, or pull the rest of the sheet forward with surprising force. You stop the mechanism, release the pressure, untangle everything, and begin again. This is still described as labour-saving equipment. After washing comes rinsing, often in a second tub of cleaner water. Bluing may be added to white fabrics to counter yellowing. The liquid must be diluted carefully because too much can leave the family looking as though their underclothes have developed political opinions. Then you wring everything once more and carry the heavy basket outside. Wet laundry weighs far more than dry laundry, suggesting that water has been concealing its true character. The clothesline stretches across the yard, between porch posts, or above a shared urban courtyard. In cold weather, your fingers stiffen as you fasten wooden clothespins. In summer, the sun beats down while the damp fabric warms against your arms. Sheets snap in the wind. Shirts hang in a row, stockings stretch downward like tired flags. Weather now becomes part of the laundry process. Rain can undo an entire morning. Dust can settle on freshly washed sheets. In industrial neighbourhoods, soot may drift from chimneys and attach itself to white fabric with a sense of comic timing. If winter temperatures fall low enough, clothes freeze stiff on the line. You carry them indoors shaped like boards and hang them near the stove to thaw. A frozen pair of trousers can briefly stand without assistance, which is more than can be said for some members of the household before coffee. Once dry, the clothing must be brought in, folded, mended, and often ironed. The iron may be a heavy flat iron heated directly on the stove. Several irons rotate through use because one cools while another heats. You test the temperature with a damp finger or scrap of cloth, then press shirts, collars, dresses, and linens while trying not to scorch them. By evening, the kitchen is humid, the floor is wet, and your arms ache from lifting, rubbing, turning, and carrying. The family's clothes are clean again. The sheets smell of soap, wind, and smoke from the stove. You stack the folded garments carefully. Then you notice one child standing in the doorway with mud on both knees. Wash day has ended. The laundry has already begun planning next Monday. Once the washing is hung, you examine the fabric waiting beside the sewing machine. Cotton sacks used for flour, sugar, and animal feed have become valuable household material, especially in rural families. Manufacturers increasingly print them with attractive patterns because they understand that women are turning the empty bags into dresses, shirts, aprons, curtains, quilts, and underclothing. You soak out the company markings, measure the usable cloth, and begin planning. A child's dress may require several matching sacks, which adds a new and strangely specific requirement to grocery shopping. The family must now eat enough flour to remain clothed, but not so quickly that the budget collapses. You guide the fabric beneath the needle and create something cheerful from commercial packaging. It is resourcefulness, fashion, and brand loyalty under conditions nobody in advertising quite anticipated. The sack begins its second life only after considerable preparation. First, you carefully remove the strong chain stitching along the seams. Pull the correct thread, and the bag opens neatly. Pull the wrong one, and you spend the next 20 minutes picking at knots while reconsidering the moral character of packaging. Once opened, the cloth must be washed repeatedly. Flour dust clings to the fibres, while company names and product markings may remain printed across the surface. Earlier sacks often carry bold logos that do not disappear easily. This is inconvenient when you're hoping to make a respectable blouse, and the front continues announcing 48 pounds of poultry feed. You soak the fabric in hot water and soap. Some women add bleach when available or use other household methods to fade the ink. You scrub, rinse, dry, and inspect it. If the lettering remains, you place it beneath a hem, inside a seam, or somewhere the finished garment is unlikely to make commercial claims during church. Manufacturers gradually become more sensitive to this problem. Some begin using removable paper labels or inks designed to wash out. Others print the cotton with flowers, checks, stripes, dots, and cheerful novelty patterns. The sack is no longer merely a container. It is a future dress waiting for the flower to leave. This produces a new form of shopping judgment. You no longer inspect only the price, weight, and quality of the product. You study the fabric. One sack has small blue flowers suitable for your daughter. Another has a brown pattern that might become a boy's shirt. A third is affordable but decorated with large orange shapes that would make any child visible across several counties. You may ask the grocer whether more sacks with the same print are available. He checks the storeroom while you stand beside the counter holding one bag against another, trying to determine whether the patterns match. Somewhere inside the sacks is the family's food. At present, the important question is whether the sleeves will agree with the bodice. Several matching bags may be required for an adult dress. A smaller child's garment uses less, though mistakes cannot be afforded. Commercial dress patterns are available, but many women also reuse older patterns, borrow from neighbours, trace existing clothing, or cut by experience. You spread the fabric across the table and position each pattern piece carefully. The strongest areas go where the garment will receive the most strain. Printed motifs must face the same direction unless you wish the flowers on one sleeve to grow downward. The sewing machine may be operated by foot treadle rather than electricity. You guide the cloth beneath the presser foot while your legs maintain a steady rhythm. The machine clicks rapidly, filling the room with a mechanical hum that sounds efficient even when you are stopping every few minutes to correct the tension. Seams are made generous enough to be let out later. Hems are deep so they can be lowered as a child grows. Extra fabric becomes pockets, collars, cuffs, hair ribbons, or patches saved for future repairs. A garment is designed not only for the body wearing it now, but for the slightly larger body expected next year. Feed sack fabric also becomes kitchen curtains, tablecloths, pillowcases, dish towels, quilts, aprons, and even undergarments. Nothing about the original container determines its social future. A sack that arrived holding chicken feed may eventually appear in church beneath a cardigan. There is no shame in this work inside communities where nearly everyone is adapting in similar ways, though children can still be sensitive about appearing poorer than their classmates. You therefore take care with the cut, the trim, and the finishing. A contrasting collar, polished buttons, or a neatly gathered waist can make reused cloth look deliberate rather than desperate. By Sunday morning, the dress is pressed and ready. Your daughter turns slowly while you check the hem. The flowers are bright, the seams are straight, and the company lettering has disappeared inside the waistband. Nobody looking at her needs to know what the fabric carried before. They only see a clean child in a new dress, while you quietly remember that it took 3 sacks of flour to get her there. Next comes the mending. The basket is always waiting because clothing does not stop deteriorating simply because replacement has become impossible. You darn socks over a wooden egg, reinforce knees, replace buttons, turn worn collars, patch elbows, and cut usable pieces from garments that can no longer be saved whole. A man's coat may become a boy's jacket, a dress may become an apron. The apron may eventually become cleaning rags, and the rags will continue serving until they have achieved the approximate texture of lace. Sewing skill is not a decorative accomplishment now, it is a household defense system. Each stitch delays a purchase, and every delayed purchase protects the rent money. You pull the thread tight, inspect the repair, and place another garment on top of the pile. The basket has noticed your optimism and produced 2 more socks. You begin with the socks because socks possess a particular talent for failing in groups. One heel is worn through completely. Another contains a hole small enough to ignore today and large enough to swallow a toe by Wednesday. You slide a wooden darning egg inside the first sock, stretching the damaged fabric smoothly across its curved surface. If you do not own a darning egg, a light bulb, smooth stone, wooden ball, or anything else approximately foot-shaped may serve. The depression is not concerned with official equipment. It respects results. You weave thread back and forth across the hole, first in one direction and then across it, creating a small fabric bridge where the original wool has disappeared. The repair is visible, but visibility is not the issue. A darned sock keeps a foot warm. A fashionable sock, under current conditions, is merely showing off. Children are especially hard on clothing. Knees meet sidewalks, fences, school floors, tree bark, mud, and several hazards that remain unexplained during questioning. 1. You cut a patch from an older garment, fold the edges beneath, and stitch it firmly over the worn cloth. A matching patch is ideal, a strong patch is more realistic. Some mothers place identical patches on both knees, so the repair appears intentional. This is a useful domestic principle. When necessity cannot be hidden, symmetry may persuade everyone that it was design. Shirts require other techniques. A frayed collar can be removed, reversed, and sewn back into place with the less worn side facing outward. Cuffs can be turned in the same way. The shirt looks renewed, provided nobody examines the underside too closely, which polite society generally does not do before lunch. Buttons are collected in tins, jars, and small boxes. Every garment too damaged to save is stripped of anything that may still be useful. Buttons, hooks, snaps, buckles, ribbons, lace, zippers, and sound pieces of fabric are all removed before the remainder becomes rags. Your button tin contains decades of family history without any labels. A pearl button from a wedding blouse rests beside a heavy coat button, several shirt buttons, a brass fastener, and one mysterious object that has been saved for years because it seems important. Finding 4 matching buttons is unlikely. Finding 4 buttons of approximately the same size and emotional tone is success. Larger garments offer more possibilities. An adult coat may be opened at the seams, turned inside out, altered, and reshaped for a child. A woman's worn dress may provide enough fabric for a girl's skirt or blouse. Men's trousers can be cut down for boys, though the areas of greatest wear must be avoided carefully. You place pattern pieces where the cloth remains strongest. Old seams, stains, tears, and faded sections dictate the layout. Sewing now resembles map-making, except the country has suffered several disasters and you are trying to establish a usable province near the waistband. Nothing is cut until you are certain. Fabric is too valuable for confidence without measurement. The sewing machine helps, but much of the delicate work is still done by hand. You hem, baste, reinforce, and mend beneath the light of a window during the day or beside a lamp at night. Your fingers become quick. You learn how much tension thread can take, how wide a seam must be, and which repairs will survive both play and wash day. You also learn that mending is never truly finished. As soon as one child's trousers are patched, another arrives with a torn pocket. Your husband's work shirt has split beneath the arm, a dress hem has come loose. A coat lining is separating quietly inside, apparently hoping to avoid detection until winter. You repair each item and return it to use. The family may never notice the hours involved, they simply discover that clothing continues to exist. By evening, the pile is smaller. Not gone, but less openly threatening. You place the remaining garments back into the basket and tuck the needle into a spool of thread. Then someone enters the room carrying a shirt with a fresh tear. The mending basket has won another day. By afternoon, the spare room may no longer be spare. Families with enough space often take in boarders or lodgers to bring money into the household. A stranger, distant relative, single worker, teacher, salesman, or newly unemployed acquaintance may rent a room and receive meals as part of the arrangement. This turns your home into a small business without removing any of its existing duties. You wash another set of sheets, prepare another plate, clean another room, and learn to conduct family life around someone who pays $8 a week and has strong feelings about eggs. Privacy becomes an item you have exchanged for groceries. The arrangement can offer companionship and vital income, but it also means the hallway is occupied, the bathroom has a schedule, and the good towel has entered public service. The room itself may have belonged to an older child, a visiting relative, or the vague category of future guests. Now you clear the dresser, shake out the mattress, mend the curtains, and remove anything too personal. A framed family photograph stays because bare walls look unfriendly. The broken chair leaves because a paying guest may expect furniture that can survive being sat upon. You place clean sheets on the bed. Clean does not necessarily mean new, matching, or entirely free from patches. It means washed, aired, and arranged with enough care to suggest that the room has not been assembled from household leftovers, even though it has. A small pitcher and basin may be provided if the room has no nearby running water. There is a hook for a coat, a lamp if electricity is available, and perhaps a rug beside the bed. The rug has recently been promoted from the hallway and does not yet know about the transfer. Then the boarder arrives with a suitcase. He may be a widower working at a local shop, a young teacher assigned to the district, a travelling salesman temporarily stranded by weak business, or a labourer employed on a public works project. He may also be a cousin whose job has disappeared and whose stay is described as temporary by everyone, including the cousin. Terms must be discussed. Rent may include breakfast and supper, laundry, heat, and use of the common rooms. Payment may come weekly, which is safer than waiting until the end of the month. During uncertain times, 4 weeks is enough for employment, money, and good intentions to vanish independently. You agree on an amount that sounds fair but still feels uncomfortable to mention. Money inside the family home has always existed, but asking for it directly changes the atmosphere. The spare bedroom now has a price, supper has a price, and every extra slice of bread has begun keeping records. At mealtimes, you add another place at the table. Portions must be stretched without making the boarder feel that his arrival has caused the potatoes to become transparent. He is paying for meals, after all. This means his plate should look respectable, even when the family's own portions quietly contract. The children are warned not to stare, interrupt, enter his room, touch his possessions, or ask how much money he earns. They absorb these instructions carefully and then ask whether he snores. His habits soon enter the household. He rises earlier than expected, prefers coffee stronger than the budget permits, and dislikes onions. He leaves muddy shoes near the door despite being shown where muddy shoes belong. Perhaps he reads the newspaper aloud, tells excellent stories, repairs a loose cupboard hinge, or teaches one child how to play checkers. A boarder can become almost part of the family. Almost is doing important work. You still dress more carefully before entering the hallway. Arguments with your husband become quieter. Children must no longer run from bedroom to bathroom in whatever state they consider convenient. The household's private rhythms are rearranged around a person who is both guest and customer. Laundry increases, so does cooking, cleaning, and the amount of hot water required. The income helps with rent, food, coal, and school supplies, but none of it arrives without additional labor from you. The home earns money because you turn beds, meals, washing, and courtesy into a service. You may take in more than one boarder if space permits. Beds can be placed in attics, enclosed porches, or divided rooms. In crowded cities, families sometimes share apartments with relatives or other households, reducing costs while increasing the number of people waiting outside one bathroom. Still, the arrangement can offer security. A reliable boarder brings cash every week. His payment may keep the landlord satisfied, the pantry stocked, and the lights connected. In uncertain times, one occupied room can hold up the entire house. That evening, you place an extra serving of stew on the table and call everyone to supper. The boarder sits down, tastes it, and says it could use more salt. You smile politely. He has paid for the room. He has not paid enough for honesty. Perhaps the boarder is not enough, and you begin looking for paid work yourself. This introduces a peculiar social problem. Your family needs money, but many employers, newspapers, politicians, and community leaders insist that a married woman taking a job is depriving a man of one. Some schools, offices, and public agencies maintain formal or informal marriage bars, particularly against married female teachers and clerical workers. The assumption is that your husband should support you, even when your husband cannot find work, and the assumption itself cannot be exchanged for bread. You may hide your marital status, accept lower wages, or take work considered properly feminine because it resembles what you already do without pay. Society is willing to forgive your earning money, provided it can pretend you are merely helping. You begin by reading the small advertisements in the newspaper. Wanted, experienced stenographer, girl for general housework, seamstress required, woman to care for children. The wording tells you exactly where society has placed you. Men are workers. Women are girls, helpers, and pleasant additions to an office, regardless of whether they are 38 years old and supporting 4 children. An office job may require typing, shorthand, filing, answering telephones, and appearing cheerful in shoes that have already been resold twice. You may have done this work before marriage. Perhaps you left because employers expected married women to return home once a husband had been acquired, as though matrimony caused immediate memory loss regarding typewriters. Now you return and discover that your experience still counts, but your marriage counts more. A manager may ask directly whether you have a husband. He may explain that jobs must go to men with families to support. You consider pointing out that you also have a family to support, but the logic has already closed for the day. Marriage bars are especially common in teaching. School boards can refuse to hire married women or dismiss female teachers once they marry. The official argument is economy and fairness to unemployed men and unmarried women. The unofficial assumption is that a wife is already being paid in domestic security, which is useful unless the domestic security has been laid off. Some women conceal their marriages. A teacher may continue using her maiden name. An office worker may remove her wedding ring before an interview and hope nobody recognizes her husband at the grocer's. This creates the strange experience of becoming less respectable in public so that you can remain economically responsible in private. Other women take work that attracts less criticism because it resembles household labor. Domestic service remains one of the largest sources of employment for women, especially black women, immigrant women, and women with few alternatives. You clean another family's house, prepare another family's meals, wash another family's clothing, and return home to perform the same work again without wages. The day has thoughtfully provided 2 shifts and 1 salary. Domestic workers often receive low pay and little security. Hours can be long. Employers may expect you to remain available beyond the agreed time because household work has no obvious finishing bell. Live-in positions may include room and meals, but they can separate you from your own family and place nearly every part of your life under an employer's supervision. Black women face especially severe discrimination. Many occupations remain closed to them regardless of training or experience. Domestic and agricultural work are treated as natural destinations rather than restricted choices, and wages are often lower than those offered to white women for comparable labor. Mexican American, Asian American, and immigrant women may encounter similar barriers shaped by race, citizenship, language, and local prejudice. The Depression has reduced opportunity for almost everyone, then distributed what remains according to rules that were unfair long before the banks failed. Factory work may be available in textiles, food processing, tobacco, clothing, or light manufacturing. Yet employers can reduce wages because women are assumed to be secondary earners. Your pay is described as extra income, even when it buys the rent, groceries, fuel, and every pair of shoes currently walking through the house. You may also work in a restaurant, laundry, hotel, hospital, shop, beauty parlor, or telephone exchange. Some of these jobs require standing for hours. Others require smiling at customers who believe their purchase includes a personal opinion about your speed. If you find work, the household duties do not vanish. Breakfast must still be made, children must still be dressed, supper must still appear. Laundry remains deeply uninterested in your employment status. You rise earlier, leave instructions for the older children, and hurry to work carrying your own lunch parcel. At the end of the day, you return to a sink of dishes and a family asking what is for supper. Your wages may be smaller than a man's, your position less secure, and your employment publicly questioned. But the grocer accepts your money without asking whether it should have been earned by your husband. That is one social barrier, at least, which hunger has managed to simplify. Paid work does not always require leaving the house. You may take in laundry, sewing, ironing, cooking, childcare, or piecework assembled at the kitchen table. The money is usually small, the hours are irregular, and the work must fit around meals, cleaning, shopping, and children. Shirts arrive bundled for washing, neighbours bring hems to shorten. A merchant may pay by the piece for artificial flowers, garments, or simple goods produced at home. Your fingers continue after supper beneath a weak lamp, because each finished item adds a few cents. Homework allows you to earn without openly abandoning domestic responsibility, which society finds reassuring. You remain exactly where a respectable wife should be, except now the kitchen table is a factory and the management has declined to provide breaks. The first bundle may arrive before breakfast dishes are dry. A neighbour brings 2 dresses requiring new hems and a coat with a torn lining. She explains that there is no hurry, which usually means she would like them tomorrow. You agree on a price low enough that she can afford it, and high enough to make the work technically worth doing. Technically is carrying much of the arrangement. You place the clothes beside your own mending basket and promise yourself that paid work will come first. Then a child spills milk, the stove smokes, and someone discovers that the clean shirt needed for school is still damp. By the time you sit at the sewing machine, the morning has already spent most of itself. Taking in laundry is even heavier work. Customers bring shirts, collars, sheets, and underclothing in bundles that must be sorted separately from the family wash. You soak, scrub, boil, rinse, wring, dry, starch, and iron each piece, knowing that damage to another person's garment could erase the profit from several days. A white shirt must return white, a collar must be stiff, a sheet must not contain soot, rust, scorch marks, or evidence that it fell into the yard while you were answering the door. The customer pays for clean laundry. The water, fuel, soap, labour, and skin from your knuckles are considered internal expenses. Ironing can continue late into the evening. Heavy flat irons are heated on the stove and rotated as they cool. You test one, press a collar, return it to the heat, and lift another. The room becomes hot even in winter. In summer, it becomes a punishment developed by someone with very strong views about wrinkles. Sewing pays a little better if you are skilled. You shorten skirts, repair seams, alter children's clothing, make curtains, and occasionally produce an entire dress from a pattern. Customers may bring their own fabric. They may also bring an optimistic amount of fabric and expect you to produce sleeves through personal conviction. Payment is sometimes delayed. A neighbour says she will settle on Friday. Friday arrives and has apparently not been informed. You dislike pressing her because you know her husband's hours have been reduced. She dislikes owing you because she knows yours has no work at all. The entire neighbourhood is operating on credit, favours, and quiet embarrassment. Piecework may come through a local shop, contractor, or factory agent. Buttons must be sewn onto cards, artificial flowers assembled, garments stitched, trimmed, or finished. Small boxes folded, paper goods pasted. The pay is calculated by the piece, so speed matters. You spread the materials across the kitchen table after supper. The children are warned not to touch them. This warning increases their interest immediately. Perhaps an older daughter helps sort pieces or count finished items. A younger child falls asleep nearby while you continue working. The radio plays softly if electricity remains connected. Your husband may read the newspaper, repair something, or sit quietly while your hands repeat the same movement dozens of times. One finished flower earns a fraction of a cent. A dozen earns more. 100 begins to resemble money, though by then your back aches and your fingers feel as if they have been borrowed by somebody less careful. There are few protections for home workers. Rates can be extremely low. Contractors may reject completed items for small defects or delay payment. Because the labour takes place inside separate homes, workers are difficult to organise and easy to overlook. The finished goods appear in stores without revealing how many women assembled them between washing dishes and putting children to bed. Childcare offers another possibility. A neighbour who has found factory or domestic work may leave her children with you for a small weekly payment. Now your home contains additional mouths, shoes, arguments, and one child who refuses everything except bread with jam. You stretch lunch again. The money from these small jobs may buy milk, coal, thread, school supplies, or part of the rent. It rarely appears large enough to justify the hours when counted by itself. Yet each coin enters the household at exactly the place where something is missing. Near midnight, you finish the last seam and stack the completed garments neatly. The housework is done. The paid work is done. Morning is several hours away, which the schedule has generously provided for rest. When the weather allows, the yard becomes part of the food supply. Families cultivate vegetables in back gardens, vacant lots, community plots, and relief gardens encouraged by local organisations and government programmes. You plant beans, cabbage, onions, carrots, tomatoes, potatoes, and anything likely to produce more food than it consumes in hope. Seeds may come through a relief agency or agricultural programme. Children help, with varying definitions of help. The garden demands water, weeding, protection from insects, and faith in weather that has already demonstrated unreliable character. For farm families, this labour joins an existing day full of poultry, dairy work, animals and fields. For city families, a few rows of vegetables can make the difference between a thin supper and an adequate one. Every green shoot is edible optimism, provided the rabbits have not received the same pamphlet. You begin by deciding where food might reasonably grow. The best patch of sunlight may already belong to the clothesline, the woodpile, or the path leading to the privy. The soil beside the house is hard, full of stones, and possibly occupied by several generations of determined weeds. You loosen it with a spade, hoe, or borrowed shovel. Each strike reveals another root. The roots appear to have organised. If you live in a city apartment, your garden may be several streets away on a vacant lot divided into narrow plots. Churches, charities, municipal agencies, and relief organisations sometimes provide land, seeds, tools, or instruction for unemployed families. These plots are called relief gardens or subsistence gardens, names that make the work sound administrative rather than muddy. You carry tools, water, and children to the site. The children are told to pull weeds and leave the vegetables alone. This is a distinction they understand in theory and revisit creatively in practice. Seeds are chosen for usefulness rather than elegance. Beans produce generously and can be dried for winter. Potatoes are filling and familiar. Cabbage keeps well and tolerates cool weather. Onions flavour meals in which flavour has otherwise suffered budget reductions. Tomatoes can be eaten fresh, cooked, or canned if the season is kind. Lettuce grows quickly but does not provide the emotional reassurance of a potato. You plant rows carefully and mark them with sticks. The seed packet gives instructions about spacing. You follow them until you begin wondering whether the unused ground could hold something else. Soon the carrots are closer than recommended. The beans have acquired neighbours, and the garden resembles a boarding house during a housing shortage. Then you wait. This is the most unreasonable part. You have dug, planted, watered, and now the ground appears exactly as it did before, except you are tired. For several days the soil offers no evidence that it intends to participate. At last, small green shoots appear. You kneel beside them and inspect each one. Some are vegetables, some are weeds arriving early to establish seniority. You learn the difference, usually after removing one promising plant and realizing too late that it had been invited. Water becomes another calculation. Rural families may use a pump, well, barrel, or nearby stream. In cities, water must be carried from a tap or drawn through a hose if one is available. Dry weeks mean repeated trips with buckets heavy enough to make every tomato feel personally demanding. Rain is welcome until it becomes too much. A hard storm can flatten young plants or wash seeds from their rows. Drought can stop growth entirely. Hail arrives without warning and performs the agricultural equivalent of breaking every dish in the kitchen. Insects take an interest. Beetles chew leaves, caterpillars appear beneath cabbage, aphids gather in groups. You pick pests off by hand, use household remedies, or follow advice from an extension agent. Some treatments are useful, others seem mainly designed to make the garden smell complicated. Animals are more direct. Rabbits take seedlings, birds investigate peas and corn. Chickens, if allowed into the garden, remove insects, scratch the soil, and occasionally dismantle the entire project with cheerful efficiency. You build small fences from scrap wire, boards, or whatever can be found. Old stockings may tie plants to stakes. Tin cans become guards around seedlings. A scarecrow stands watching clothing too worn even for the mending basket, finally receiving a position suited to its condition. When vegetables begin to mature, meals change. Tender beans go into the pot, lettuce appears at supper. Potatoes are dug carefully, each one emerging from the soil like buried currency. Tomatoes ripen faster than the family can eat them, which means canning day is approaching with steam and strong opinions. The children may complain about weeding, but they take pride in carrying food indoors. A small basket of beans means one less purchase at the store. A row of potatoes may last for weeks. Surplus produce can be traded with neighbours for eggs, fruit, milk, or another vegetable your own soil refused to consider. By late summer, the garden looks tired, leaves yellow, vines collapse. You gather the final produce, save seeds when practical, and turn what remains back into the soil or feed it to animals. The garden has not ended the depression, but it has filled bowls, stocked jars, and given the family something green to watch while the newspapers remained grey. That is a respectable harvest from a patch of ground behind the laundry. When the garden produces, the kitchen becomes hot enough to develop its own climate. Jars are washed and heated. Fruit and vegetables are peeled, chopped, cooked, packed, sealed, and processed according to the best safety guidance available. Pressure canners are necessary for safely preserving low-acid foods, though not every household owns one or understands the danger of improper methods. Extension agents and home economists work to teach safer practices because botulism is an especially severe penalty for economical green beans. Still, canning remains essential. Rows of jars represent food stored against winter, unemployment, crop failure, and unexpected guests. You wipe each rim and listen for the seal. In January, those tomatoes will taste like summer. Today, they taste mainly of steam, aching feet, and the knowledge that you still have 3 baskets left. The work begins early, before the heat becomes openly hostile. Tomatoes wait in crates. Beans lie in baskets. Peaches soften on the table with the calm urgency of fruit that has already chosen tomorrow as its final day of cooperation. You inspect everything carefully. Bruised portions can be cut away if the rest is sound. Mold, rot, or doubtful smells are not negotiated with. A depression kitchen wastes nothing useful, but it must still recognize when an ingredient has crossed from economical into dangerous. The jars may have been used many times before. You hold each one toward the window and search for cracks or chips around the rim. A damaged jar can break in the canner or fail to seal, which would be disappointing after several hours of labour, and particularly theatrical if it happens while filled with boiling tomatoes. Lids and rubber rings must also be examined. Depending on the type of jar, the sealing equipment may be reusable or partly replaceable. You wash everything in hot soapy water, rinse it, and keep the jars warm until filling. A cold jar meeting hot food may split, because glass also has feelings about sudden change. Soon the kitchen fills with activity. Tomatoes are dipped into boiling water so their skins loosen, then plunged into cooler water and peeled. Peaches receive similar treatment. Beans are washed, trimmed, and snapped into pieces. Apples are cored and sliced. Cucumbers wait in brine beside garlic, dill, spices, or whatever the recipe and pantry permit. Children may be assigned small jobs. One washes fruit, another carries empty jars. A third is told not to touch the hot stove and spends the next hour orbiting it with intense scientific interest. You follow a tested recipe when one is available. Acidity, processing time, jar size, and method matter. High-acid foods such as many fruits, pickles, jams, and properly acidified tomatoes can be processed in a boiling water bath. Low-acid foods such as plain vegetables and meats require the higher temperatures reached inside a pressure canner. This distinction is not decorative. Botulism toxin can develop in improperly canned low-acid food, without producing an obvious smell or taste. During the 1930s, extension agents, agricultural colleges, and home demonstration programs work hard to spread safer preservation methods. They encourage women to use reliable instructions rather than inherited techniques that begin with a grandmother saying she always did it this way. Grandmother may have been fortunate. Fortune is not a processing temperature. If you own a pressure canner, it sits heavily on the stove, fitted with a lid, vent, and gauge or weighted control. You load the jars, fasten the lid, allow steam to vent, and watch the pressure closely. The canner must remain within the correct range for the required time. Too little pressure risks unsafe food. Too much pressure can force liquid from jars or damage the contents. You stand nearby, adjusting the heat and listening to the steady sound of the regulator. It is less like cooking and more like supervising a small locomotive in your kitchen. For jams and preserves, the work is sweeter but no cooler. Fruit, sugar, and sometimes added pectin boil in a wide pan until the mixture reaches the proper consistency. Sugar is expensive, so preserve making may depend on what can be spared or purchased in quantity during the harvest season. You skim foam, test a spoonful, and pour the hot mixture into jars. A little spills onto the table and becomes adhesive almost immediately. By the end of the day, every surface in the kitchen is either wet, sticky, or hot enough to discourage investigation. Filled jars are processed, lifted out with tongs, and placed upright on folded towels. They must cool without being disturbed. Then comes the sound everyone is waiting for. A soft metallic pop. One lid draws inward and seals. Then another. You count each sound with satisfaction. A sealed jar means one more portion of summer has been stored against winter. A failed seal means refrigeration, immediate use, or reprocessing if it can be done safely. By evening, the shelves hold tomatoes, beans, peaches, pickles, applesauce, or preserves, glowing in rows of red, green, gold, and amber. Each jar contains food, but also hours of preparation, fuel, heat, caution, and knowledge passed among women through kitchens, demonstrations, recipe sheets, and family habit. You wipe the final jar and label it with the contents and year. The kitchen is in ruins. Your feet ache. Your dress clings to your back. The stove is still radiating enough heat to influence local weather. But winter is now standing on the shelf, neatly sealed and waiting its turn. It is time to think about supper, where economical cooking becomes a form of stagecraft. Meat, when available, is extended through gravy, potatoes, breadcrumbs, rice, noodles, beans, vegetables, or sauces. Less expensive cuts are simmered slowly. A little ground meat becomes a loaf large enough to suggest abundance. Leftover chicken reappears in a casserole surrounded by enough starch to require introductions. Cookbooks and magazines offer recipes for mock dishes, creamed vegetables, Welsh rabbit, bean loaves, soups, stews, and combinations that depend heavily on the diner's willingness to support the household emotionally. You season carefully and arrange the food on a serving plate, rather than placing the pot directly on the table. Presentation cannot increase the quantity, but it can make the quantity feel as though it has arrived intentionally. You begin by inspecting what remains from earlier meals. There is half an onion, 2 soft potatoes, a cup of cooked beans, and a small portion of meat that would struggle to dominate a sandwich. Alone, these ingredients are not supper. Together, with enough confidence, they may become a casserole. The meat is chopped finely. Large pieces encourage counting, and counting is the enemy of economical cooking. Small pieces travel farther, particularly when surrounded by gravy. You brown them with onion, then add flour and water or broth until the pan contains a sauce generous enough to make everyone believe the meat is merely beneath the surface. Gravy performs important emotional work during the Depression. It brings moisture to stale bread, flavour to potatoes, and dignity to dishes that would otherwise look like several unrelated ingredients sharing a plate for financial reasons. If there is no meat, the meal must proceed without admitting it. Beans can become a loaf when mashed with breadcrumbs, onion, seasoning, and perhaps an egg if the household has recently experienced prosperity. Lentils, peas, or leftover vegetables can receive similar treatment. The mixture is shaped into a pan, baked, sliced, and served with sauce. Calling it a loaf is essential. A pile of beans invites questions. A bean loaf has structure and has clearly attended a planning meeting. Welsh rabbit offers another possibility. Despite the name, it contains no rabbit. It is a hot cheese sauce served over toast, and the absence of rabbit is not an economical substitution. The dish has always been misleading. During lean years, the cheese may be stretched with milk, flour, mustard, or whatever remains available. Poured over bread, it becomes warm, filling, and respectable enough to appear in cookbooks without an apology. Creamed dishes are equally useful. Vegetables, eggs, chipped beef, tuna, or leftover chicken can be folded into a white sauce and served over toast, biscuits, potatoes, or noodles. The sauce makes a small amount of food travel across several plates, while maintaining the impression that this was the desired arrangement all along. You stir slowly and watch the mixture thicken. The children ask what is for supper. You give them the official name from the recipe. They ask what is in it. This question is treated as unnecessary curiosity. Soup offers the greatest flexibility. A pot can hold beans, cabbage, potatoes, tomatoes, rice, noodles, barley, bones, and any vegetable approaching the end of its useful life. Water increases the volume, while slow cooking blends the flavors into something that feels more complete than its individual parts. A ham bone may be added for depth. It may already have appeared in several meals, but it continues lending its presence like an elderly relative who no longer performs physical labor but is respected for previous service. Dumplings can be dropped onto the surface of a stew to make it more filling. Biscuits may be served alongside. Cornbread absorbs broth and quiets complaints. Bread has become the household's most dependable supporting actor. It appears in crumbs, pudding, stuffing, toast, dumplings, sandwiches, and occasionally in its original form. You set the table before serving. The plates may be chipped, the cloth faded, and the silverware assembled from several different sets, but everything is clean and arranged neatly. A small jar of flowers from the garden may stand in the centre when flowers are available. This care is not frivolous. A family living with uncertainty needs meals that still feel like meals. Sitting together, using proper plates, and passing the serving dish creates order around food that has been stretched nearly beyond recognition. Your husband takes the first bite and says it is good. He may mean it. He may also understand that honesty has practical limits when someone has spent an hour transforming half an onion into supper. The children eat, though one separates the beans from the potatoes as if conducting an investigation. You encourage everyone to finish what is on the plate. There will be no waste, and there may be no second helping. When the serving dish returns to you, only a small portion remains. You divide it among anyone still hungry and say you tasted enough while cooking. The supper contained very little meat. It did, however, contain potatoes, bread, beans, gravy, patience, and a level of theatrical confidence normally associated with Broadway. Under the circumstances, the performance has been a success. After supper, almost nothing is thrown away. A spoonful of vegetables joins tomorrow's soup. Bread crusts dry for crumbs. Bones return to the pot. Meat drippings are saved. Fruit that has softened becomes sauce, pie filling, or preserves. Sour milk may still find a role in baking if it remains safe to use. You understand leftovers not as repeated meals but as ingredients requiring a new identity. Yesterday's roast becomes hash. The hash becomes filling for a pie. The final fragments enrich soup, and the soup's remains may still be examined with interest. A modern household might call this meal planning. You call it refusing to permit a carrot to retire while it remains structurally recognizable. By the end of the week, nothing has been wasted, although several ingredients have appeared under assumed names. You begin with the serving dishes. A spoonful of peas remains beside 2 pieces of potato and a quantity of gravy too small to serve but too flavorful to dismiss. You scrape everything into separate bowls or jars, cover them with plates or waxed paper, and place them in the coolest part of the pantry or icebox. Refrigeration, when available, depends on actual ice. A delivery man brings a heavy block, carries it inside with metal tongs, and slides it into the upper compartment of the icebox. Cold air settles around the food below while melted water collects in a drip pan that must be emptied before it overflows. This is less convenient than a modern refrigerator, but it does provide the household with a recurring suspense plot involving the drip tray. In homes without an icebox, food may be stored in a cellar, springhouse, screened cupboard, or other cool place. Leftovers must be used quickly. You inspect them carefully before serving. Frugality requires judgment. Saving food does not mean pretending spoilage has become nutritious. Bread receives especially careful treatment. Crusts and stale slices are dried near the stove, then crushed with a rolling pin or grated into crumbs. These crumbs stretch meatloaf, thicken sauces, coat fried foods, top casseroles, and become stuffing. A dry slice may be softened in milk, dipped in egg, or toasted until its age appears intentional. Bread pudding turns stale bread into dessert with milk, sugar, spice, and perhaps raisins if fortune has recently visited. You tear the bread into a bowl and pour the custard over it. What was too dry for breakfast now emerges from the oven warm, sweet, and respectable. This transformation is one of your specialties. Ingredients do not merely return. They return improved enough to discourage witnesses from discussing their earlier condition. Cooked potatoes become hash, cakes, soup thickener, or filling for pasties. Rice may become pudding or join a casserole. Oatmeal can be chilled, sliced, and fried. Cornmeal mush behaves similarly, appearing the following morning with crisp edges and an entirely new attitude. Meat requires the most careful disguise because there is rarely enough of it to repeat the original meal. A few scraps of beef are minced with potatoes and onion for hash. Chicken is removed from the bones and added to gravy, noodles, biscuits, or a pie. Ham fragments flavour beans or eggs. The carcass goes into a stock pot with water, onion skins, celery leaves, carrot ends, salt, and whatever herbs remain. It simmers until every useful trace has entered the broth. You strain the liquid and inspect the bones. They have served in dinner, sandwiches, casserole, and soup. There is nothing left to ask of them without becoming unreasonable. Fats are saved with almost equal care. Drippings from roasting meat are poured into a jar. Bacon grease remains near the stove. Chicken fat is kept separately when possible. These fats flavour vegetables, fry potatoes, enrich biscuits, and reduce the need for purchase shortening. You label the jars or remember them by sight. Confusing bacon grease with sweet baking fat creates a biscuit with a complicated personality. Vegetables are folded into soup, stew, hash, or sauce. A small portion of peas can disappear into a shepherd's pie. Cooked cabbage joins potatoes in a skillet. Carrots are mashed, chopped, or added to broth. Nothing must remain recognizably itself if recognition might produce complaints. Fruit receives sweeter treatment. Soft apples become applesauce or pie filling. Overripe peaches are cooked with sugar. Bruised berries become jam if there are enough. Even fruit peel may be candied in wealthier moments, though sugar must first survive the budgeting process. By Friday, the family may be eating a meal whose ingredients began appearing on Monday. Nobody is told this directly. The dish has a fresh name, a new shape, and perhaps a layer of gravy. You place it on the table with confidence. A child looks at it carefully and says it seems familiar. You explain that good recipes often do. The Depression has made one thing very clear. Food may return several times, but it must never be seen arriving in the same outfit. Then comes a knock at the door. It may be the landlord, rent collector, mortgage representative, shopkeeper, or another person whose visit requires money you do not currently possess. During the Depression, families lose homes, farms, apartments, and rooms when wages disappear and savings fail. Some landlords show patience. Others have creditors of their own. You speak quietly in the hallway so the children will not hear. Perhaps you offer part of the amount and promise the rest after payday, relief approval, harvest, or a relative's letter. Every promise depends on an event beyond your control. Behind you, the house remains clean, the curtains are straight, and supper has been served. Domestic order creates the appearance that everything is under control, which is useful when the actual control belongs to a man holding a ledger. You recognize the rhythm of the knock before opening the door. Friends tap lightly and call your name. Children burst in without knocking at all. A person expecting payment knocks 3 firm times, then waits with the confidence of someone who believes the door itself owes him money. You wipe your hands on your apron and glance toward the kitchen. The children are doing homework at the table. You tell them to keep working, using a voice calm enough to suggest that nothing important is happening. Then you step into the hallway and close the door behind you. The landlord removes his hat. Perhaps he is uncomfortable. Perhaps he is tired of being uncomfortable. He may own only this building and depend on rent to pay taxes, repairs, and his own mortgage. The depression has created a long chain of people owing money to someone above them, each hoping the person below will somehow produce it. You explain that your husband's wages were short this week. The factory reduced hours. The road crew has not called him back. The relief payment is delayed. You have taken in sewing, but the customer has not paid yet. Each explanation is true. Together, they still do not equal the rent. You offer a few dollars from the emergency money. Accepting it means there will be less for coal, food, medicine, or shoes. Refusing to offer it may suggest you are not trying. Poverty requires you to demonstrate sacrifice before anyone will consider patience. The landlord opens his ledger. Your family's name appears beside neat columns of figures. A home that contains beds, meals, arguments, birthdays, and children with muddy shoes has been reduced to a line of unpaid numbers. He may agree to wait another week. He may accept part payment and write the remainder beneath it. He may warn you that the owner of the building is becoming impatient, even if he is the owner and prefers to let impatience sound like a separate department. If he is less sympathetic, the conversation changes. Notices may be served, furniture may be set outside, locks may be changed. Families evicted from apartments double up with relatives, rent smaller rooms, move into boarding houses, or construct makeshift shelters in communities that become known as Hoovervilles. On farms, the threat carries even greater weight. A failed crop and unpaid mortgage can mean losing not only the house, but the land, tools, animals, and the work around which an entire family has built its life. Foreclosure sales draw neighbours who sometimes bid very little and return the property to the original farmer, an act of quiet resistance known in some places as a penny auction. Banks do not admire this community spirit. Back in your hallway, the discussion remains polite because politeness is one of the few things neither side has yet repossessed. You promise payment by Friday. Friday has become a popular destination for money that does not currently exist. After the visitor leaves, you stand with your hand on the doorknob for a moment. Then you return to the kitchen. The children look up. You say the landlord only stopped by to ask about the rent. This is technically accurate and therefore considered reassuring. You straighten the papers on the table, stir the pot on the stove, and continue with the evening. There is no advantage in allowing fear to sit openly among the family. It already occupies enough rooms without being given a chair. That night, you count the money again after everyone is asleep. The rent is still due. The house is still yours until someone says otherwise. For now, you wash the final dish, turn down the lamp, and behave as though Friday knows what it is doing. When rent is uncertain, utilities become another calculation. Electricity has reached many American homes by the Depression, especially in towns and cities, but rural electrification remains limited until New Deal programs accelerate its spread. Even where wires exist, service must be paid for. You reduce the use of lamps, heat fewer rooms, cook efficiently, and warn everyone that electricity costs money as though the light bulbs have been purchasing jewelry. If power or gas is disconnected, the household retreats to oil lamps, candles, wood, coal, or whatever remains available. Rooms close for winter, family members gather where one stove can warm them. The dark arrives earlier indoors because you have invited it as a budget measure. This saves several cents and ensures that every chair leg becomes a matter of personal discovery. The bill arrives in an envelope that appears unnecessarily clean and confident. You open it at the kitchen table, smooth the paper, and study the total. The amount is not enormous by itself. The problem is that it has arrived beside the rent, grocery account, coal payment, and a child who requires new shoes with very little respect for timing. You place the bill beneath the sugar bowl while considering it. The sugar bowl has become the household's unofficial financial office. Bills wait beneath it. Coins hide behind it. Important notices are placed nearby until you have developed a plan, or enough courage to read them twice. Electric lighting has transformed domestic life for families who have it. A bulb is cleaner and safer than an open flame, produces less smoke than a kerosene lamp, and can be turned on without trimming a wick or searching for matches. But every moment of light passes quietly through a meter, and the meter is not sentimental about children doing homework. You begin enforcing rules. Only one lamp is used in the sitting room. Nobody leaves a light burning in an empty hallway. Children are instructed to turn off bulbs when leaving a room, then are instructed again several seconds later because childhood apparently interferes with electricity conservation. Family members gather around the brightest lamp. One child reads, another writes. You sew or mend beneath the same circle of light while your husband studies the newspaper. Everyone leans inward, becoming a small domestic solar system arranged around a 40-watt bulb. The corners of the room disappear into shadow. This is useful because the corners contain dust. If the house is heated by gas, electricity, or a central furnace, warmth must also be rationed. Bedrooms remain cold, doors are closed to rooms not in use. Towels or rolled newspapers are placed along drafts beneath doors. Curtains are drawn early. Rugs, blankets, quilts, and coats become part of the heating system. The family spends winter evenings in the kitchen or sitting room near the stove. Children dress for bed beside the fire, then run quickly into cold bedrooms and dive beneath heavy blankets. A warmed brick wrapped in cloth may be placed near the feet. Hot water bottles help if you own one and if the stopper has not developed independent views about leakage. You may heat flat irons or stones near the stove and wrap them carefully. Anything capable of holding warmth is considered for the position, provided it is unlikely to burn the mattress or roll onto a sleeping child. In rural areas, many homes still have no electric service at all. Kerosene lamps, candles, and lanterns provide light. Water is pumped by hand. Washing machines, refrigerators, radios, and electric irons remain unavailable or depend on engines, batteries, or other arrangements. The Rural Electrification Administration, created in 1935, begins helping cooperatives bring power lines into the countryside. Progress is significant, but it takes time. Poles must be raised, wires stretched, and farms connected across long distances that private companies had often considered unprofitable. When electricity finally reaches a rural home, the first bulb can feel almost miraculous. One switch replaces the wick, smoke, soot, and constant risk of an overturned lamp. Yet the new service still comes with a meter and a bill. Miracles, it turns out, have monthly accounting. If your service is disconnected, you return to older methods. Kerosene lamps are cleaned and filled, wicks are trimmed to prevent smoking, candles are used sparingly. Their remains are melted and formed into new candles when possible. A lamp chimney must be washed because soot dims the light. You polish the glass carefully, knowing that one slip creates both darkness and an expense. Evenings become shorter when lighting costs money. You finish tasks while daylight remains, move chairs nearer the window, and save detailed sewing for the brightest hours. After sunset, conversation, radio programs, cards, and quiet work happen close together in one room. The darkness outside presses against the windows. Inside, one lamp glows above the family. It is not much light, but everyone is gathered within it, and for tonight, the company has not turned it off. At some point, one of the children coughs differently. You touch a forehead, listen to breathing, and begin calculating again. Doctors still make house calls in many communities, and hospitals and clinics are becoming more important, but medical care costs money. Public clinics, charity hospitals, county services, visiting nurses, and relief agencies may help, though access varies greatly. Minor illnesses are treated at home with rest, liquids, poultices, patent remedies, family knowledge, and careful watching. Some treatments are useful. Others are mainly evidence that the bottle has an impressive label. Before antibiotics become widely available in the following decade, infections that modern families treat routinely can become dangerous. You sit beside the bed through the night, changing cool cloths and waiting for the fever to decide what kind of story this will be. The first question is whether the child is merely unwell or dangerously ill. Unfortunately, the child has not studied medicine and offers little assistance. He says his throat hurts, his legs ache, and he does not want breakfast. Refusing breakfast gets your attention more quickly than the thermometer. If you own a thermometer, you shake it down, place it carefully, and watch the thin column rise. Thermometers are made of glass, which seems unnecessarily delicate for an object regularly placed near sick, restless children. You hold it toward the light and read the number twice. The fever is high enough to worry you, but perhaps not high enough to justify the doctor's fee. This is the kind of medical distinction no mother should have to calculate and many depression mothers do. You put the child back to bed. Curtains are partly drawn. Another blanket is added, then removed when he becomes too hot. Water, weak tea, broth, or diluted fruit juice is offered. The important thing is to keep him drinking, though persuading a feverish child to cooperate with sensible treatment remains as difficult in the 1930s as it is now. Home remedies arrive from several generations at once. Your mother recommends one thing, a neighbour recommends another. The newspaper advertises a tonic capable of addressing coughs, fatigue, poor appetite, weak nerves, and possibly disappointment with local government. You may rub the chest with a strong-smelling ointment, fill the room with steam, prepare a mustard plaster, or place cool cloths across the forehead. Mustard plasters can warm the skin and were widely used for chest complaints, but left too long they may burn, adding a new problem directly above the first. Castor oil is another household regular. It is offered for complaints ranging from constipation to general internal disobedience. Children recognize the bottle immediately and may experience a sudden improvement before the spoon reaches them. Aspirin is available, though dosing children is not understood with modern precision, and certain dangers associated with its use will not be recognized for decades. Medicines are measured according to labels, family habit, and whatever instructions a physician has previously provided. The margin between treatment and guesswork can be uncomfortably narrow. Some diseases are especially feared. Pneumonia can become deadly. Diphtheria can obstruct breathing. Scarlet fever, measles, tuberculosis, and whooping cough move through schools and crowded homes with little respect for household budgets. Vaccines exist for some illnesses, but access, acceptance, and public health systems vary widely from place to place. If the symptoms worsen, the calculation ends. You send for the doctor. He may arrive carrying a black bag, remove his coat, and sit beside the bed. He listens to the chest, examines the throat, checks the pulse, and asks questions while you stand nearby studying his expression. Payment may be made in cash, delayed through an account, or sometimes offered through produce, eggs, labour, or another arrangement in rural communities. Some physicians treat families despite unpaid bills because they know perfectly well why the bill is unpaid. Others cannot continue indefinitely without income. Even compassion must purchase medical supplies. By the middle of the decade, sulfur drugs begin offering doctors an important new weapon against certain bacterial infections, but they are not a universal cure and are not immediately available to every family. Penicillin will not enter broad civilian use until the 1940s. For now, much of treatment remains supportive care, isolation, nursing, and waiting. That means the nursing falls largely to you. You wash cups separately, change bedding, prepare broth, keep other children away, and sleep in short pieces beside the bed. Every cough wakes you. Every quiet interval wakes you more quickly. Near dawn, the fever finally begins to ease. The child asks for water, then says he might eat toast. You breathe again. The doctor may receive the credit. The medicine may receive the credit. But you know who spent the night watching every breath. Families continue to grow during the Depression because life does not pause while the economy reorganizes itself. Reliable contraception is not equally available, information is restricted in many places, and reproductive decisions are shaped by religion, law, health, money, and circumstance. Depending on where you live and what you can afford, a baby may arrive at home with a physician or midwife, or in a hospital where maternity care is increasingly common. Either way, preparations must be made. Old baby clothes are retrieved, washed, patched, and softened. A cradle is borrowed, blankets are cut down. Older children move closer together. The new baby enters a household already measuring every spoonful, then immediately requires warmth, food, washing, and complete nighttime management. Fortunately, babies have always respected economic forecasts very little. You begin preparing months before the birth, though preparing may consist largely of locating items that survived the previous child. A box is brought down from the attic or taken from beneath a bed. Inside are tiny shirts, knitted caps, cloth diapers, safety pins, and garments so small that it seems impossible any member of the family was once permitted to fit inside them. Everything is inspected. Buttons are replaced, torn seams are repaired, stains are soaked. Flannel blankets are cut from larger worn pieces, and the softest sections of old clothing become washcloths. A baby does not require fashionable equipment, but it does require an astonishing quantity of fabric. Cloth diapers must be washed, boiled, rinsed, dried, and folded repeatedly. Disposable diapers do not yet arrive in convenient packages to remove the consequences from the premises. Every diaper returns to you with evidence. A cradle may be borrowed from a sister, neighbour, church family, or cousin. The mattress is aired, the wood scrubbed, and the bedding fitted carefully. If there is no cradle, a drawer, basket, or small box may be arranged safely near the mother's bed. The baby is unlikely to object to the furniture. It has recently lived without furniture entirely. Prenatal care varies widely. A woman with access to a doctor or clinic may receive examinations and advice about diet, rest, and warning signs. Public health nurses and maternity clinics provide important services in some communities. Poor women, rural women, and black women facing segregated and unequal medical systems may have far fewer options. In much of the South, experienced black midwives attend births in their communities, carrying knowledge developed through years of practice. Public health departments increasingly regulate and train midwives during this period, though officials often treat traditional practitioners with suspicion while relying heavily on their work. When labour begins, the household shifts around you. Children may be sent to a neighbour, water is heated, towels and linens are gathered, a doctor or midwife is called if one has been arranged. Your husband may pace nearby, attempt to be useful, and discover that the available positions have already been filled by people who know what they are doing. Home birth remains common, particularly in rural and poorer households, but hospital delivery is becoming more frequent during the 1930s. Hospitals offer trained staff and equipment, yet they also bring fees, rules, and separation from home. Whichever setting you enter, childbirth remains physically dangerous. Maternal and infant mortality are much higher than in modern America, and effective antibiotics, safer blood transfusion practices, and improved obstetric care are not yet universally available. For now, however, the room narrows to breathing, instruction, pain, and waiting. Then the baby cries. Everyone in the house exhales. The child is washed, wrapped, examined, and placed in your arms. It has no knowledge of unemployment figures, foreclosure notices, or relief budgets. It is interested in warmth, milk, and making certain nobody sleeps for more than 2 consecutive hours. Feeding may mean breastfeeding, which costs no grocery money but requires your time, health, and adequate nourishment. When breastfeeding is difficult or impossible, families may use cow's milk, canned evaporated milk mixtures, or commercial infant foods according to medical advice and available means. Safe preparation is essential, especially where clean water and refrigeration are uncertain. The baby's arrival also rearranges the household. Older children share beds or move rooms. A sister learns to rock the cradle. A brother is sent for water. Everyone is asked to be quiet at exactly the moment the baby begins, demonstrating that quiet is not a shared family objective. Expenses appear immediately. There may be a doctor's fee, medicine, extra fuel, milk, soap, and laundry. Yet assistance also arrives. A neighbour brings soup. A relative sends baby clothes. Someone leaves eggs at the door. Women who have very little still find something to share because they understand precisely what the first weeks require. That night, you lie awake listening to the baby breathe. The budget is tighter. The room is fuller. Tomorrow's work has multiplied. But beneath the patched blanket rests one small person who has arrived with nothing and somehow made the household feel richer. Not every form of relief comes through an office. Much of it crosses a fence, moves through a church basement, arrives in a covered dish, or is left quietly beside a back door. Neighbours exchange garden produce, clothing, childcare, tools, rides, fuel, and information about work. Families double up in homes. Relatives send small amounts of money when they can. Women organise church suppers, sewing circles, food collections, and informal systems of support whose paperwork consists mainly of remembering who needs what. Pride is protected through careful language. Food is not charity. There was simply too much. A coat is not donated. The child has outgrown it. Sugar is not a gift. You can return it later. Everyone understands the arrangement and politely misunderstands it together, which is sometimes the kindest form of accounting. The knock may come in the middle of the afternoon. Your neighbour stands outside holding a covered bowl and says she made more stew than her family can possibly eat. You both know this is unlikely. Nobody accidentally produces excessive stew during the Great Depression. Stew is measured with the concentration of bridge engineering. Yet you accept the bowl without challenging the story, because challenging it would force both of you to name what is happening. You thank her and promise to return the dish. The dish is the only part she expects back. Next week, if your garden produces beans, you will carry some across the fence and explain that the vines have become unreasonable. Perhaps her children need sweaters and yours have outgrown too. Perhaps she has eggs while you have preserves. Nothing is assigned an exact value because exact values create debts, and debts between struggling neighbours can become heavier than the goods exchanged. Instead, favours move back and forth until nobody can remember who began. A borrowed cup of sugar may return as 2 onions, an hour of childcare, or help hanging laundry before rain. A ride into town may be repaid with sewing. Someone lends a shovel, someone else repairs a hinge. A woman who owns a pressure canner allows 3 families to use it, turning one kitchen into a small preservation factory for several days. These exchanges do not eliminate poverty, but they prevent each household from having to own every tool, solve every problem, and endure every emergency alone. Churches become central to this quiet network. Women collect clothing, prepare communal meals, assemble food baskets, and organize sales or suppers to raise money for families in trouble. A church basement may contain tables piled with canned goods, folded garments, and shoes arranged by size. Receiving help there can still feel uncomfortable. You may enter through a side door, speak softly, and avoid anyone whose opinion you fear. The women distributing the food often understand this. They place items into a sack without unnecessary questions and discuss the weather while doing it. A sack of flour is easier to carry when nobody narrates your gratitude. Sewing circles repair donated clothing before passing it along. A coat with worn cuffs is turned, patched, brushed, and presented as something a child has simply outgrown. A dress is shortened for a smaller girl. Shoes are cleaned and fitted with new laces. The purpose is not only to provide clothing, it is to make the clothing feel received rather than rescued. Family networks stretch farther. A sister in another state sends $5 hidden inside a letter. An uncle ships potatoes after harvest. A cousin offers a room when rent can no longer be managed. Sometimes several relatives move into one house, increasing warmth, labour, noise, and the number of people attempting to use the kitchen at once. Doubling up can protect everyone from homelessness, but it removes privacy almost completely. Children sleep 2 or 3 to a bed. Adults occupy parlours, attics, or enclosed porches. Meals grow larger while portions remain small. Family unity becomes easier to praise from a bedroom containing fewer relatives. Information is also shared. A neighbour hears that a factory will hire 20 workers on Monday. Someone learns that relief flour is being distributed at the schoolhouse. A woman tells you which grocer has lowered the price of lard, which doctor allows payment over time, and which landlord has an empty room. News travels along fences, laundry lines, church pews, porches, and shop counters. It may reach you faster than anything printed in the newspaper, though it also gathers decoration along the way. A rumour about 10 jobs can become 50 before breakfast. Still, you pass it on. In the evening, you serve your neighbour's stew. The children ask where it came from. You say she cooked too much. They accept this because children understand that adults sometimes provide explanations designed not to be examined. Tomorrow, you will wash the bowl and return it with 2 jars of tomatoes tucked beside it. You will say, "The pantry is crowded." She will not believe you. She will thank you anyway. Between the 2 houses, hunger has crossed the fence and returned wearing good manners. For families on the Great Plains, hardship may arrive through the air itself. Drought, severe wind erosion, damaged grasslands, and repeated dust storms turn parts of the 1930s into the Dust Bowl. You wet cloths and place them over window cracks. You cover food. You hang damp sheets. Still, the dust enters beneath doors, through walls, around frames, and into beds, cupboards, mouths, and lungs. Daylight can darken until lamps are needed at noon. Farm women sweep and wipe surfaces that are buried again before the cloth dries. Crops fail. Animals suffer. Banks demand payments from land no longer producing enough to make them. The house becomes a fort against soil that used to remain politely outdoors. You finish sweeping one room and discover that the landscape has entered another. You may notice the storm first as a line along the horizon. It looks like weather from a distance, though not weather you recognize. The sky turns brown, then copper, then nearly black. Birds disappear. Animals grow restless. Someone outside shouts that the dust is coming, and the household begins moving with the speed usually reserved for fire. Windows are shut, doors are fastened, laundry is pulled from the line, although several sheets have already changed colour. You stuff damp rags into cracks and place wet cloth over the children's mouths. Plates are covered. Water buckets receive lids. The bread is wrapped twice. Then the wind strikes the house. Dust rattles against the windows like dry rain. It pushes through gaps too narrow for light. It descends from the ceiling, settles on the stove, and forms thin lines along the baseboards. You can taste grit between your teeth. Every breath feels as though the room has been lightly seasoned with the county. The storm may last minutes or hours. Some of the worst black blizzards turn midday into darkness so complete that families light lamps and remain close together, unable to see the barn from the kitchen window. You listen to the wind and wonder whether the roof will hold, whether the animals are sheltered, and how much of the topsoil will still belong to your farm by morning. The dust is not simply ordinary dirt. Years of drought have dried the soil, while widespread ploughing and the loss of deep-rooted prairie grasses have left large areas vulnerable to powerful winds. When crops fail, bare fields offer little resistance. The soil lifts into the air and travels hundreds of miles, carrying farms away one grain at a time. Once the storm passes, the work begins. You sweep the floors slowly to avoid raising another cloud inside the house. Dust lies beneath rugs, inside drawers, between folded sheets, and in cupboards that were firmly closed. It coats the dishes. It rests inside the sugar bowl. You remove a lid from a pot and discover that the dust has somehow attended supper without entering through the door. Beds must be shaken out before anyone can sleep. Mattresses are brushed. Pillowcases are changed if clean ones remain. Children's hair is washed or combed repeatedly. Their ears contain enough soil to begin a small garden. The physical strain is serious. Dust irritates eyes, skin, throats, and lungs. Children and older people are especially vulnerable to respiratory illness. What becomes known as dust pneumonia can bring coughing, chest pain, fever, and dangerous difficulty breathing. Clinics and Red Cross workers distribute masks in some areas, though a simple mask cannot fully protect someone living inside a moving field. Outside, the damage is worse. Wheat shrivels, gardens disappear beneath drifts, fence posts become buried, cattle lose weight or die when pasture and water fail, chickens stop laying, machinery fills with dust. A farm that once produced food and income now consumes seed, fuel, taxes, and mortgage payments while returning almost nothing. You still cook, clean, mend, and care for children, but every domestic task is tied to a failing landscape. There is less milk because the cow is thin. There are fewer eggs because the hens are stressed. There is no garden because the seedlings were cut down by blowing sand. Eventually, the family may face the question nobody wants to ask. Do you stay? Thousands leave the plains and travel west, often toward California carrying mattresses, pots, tools, clothing, and hope tied to overloaded cars. Those who remain endure more storms, relief applications, conservation programs, and seasons of waiting for rain. That evening you sweep the windowsill one final time and place a wet cloth over the child's bed. By morning, another thin layer has formed. The house is closed. The windows are sealed. And still, the farm keeps coming inside. The depression is national, but assistance is not distributed on equal terms. Your experience changes sharply if you are Black, Mexican American, Native American, Asian American, an immigrant, or part of another community already facing discrimination. Local relief agencies may segregate facilities, reduce payments, favour white applicants, or deny aid through rules applied selectively. Black women are often pushed toward domestic and agricultural labour, sectors excluded from important early federal labour protections and the original Social Security system. Mexican-American families face discrimination, coercive repatriation campaigns, and removal that sometimes includes United States citizens. You may wait in the same economic crisis as everyone else and still encounter a separate door, a smaller payment, or no protection at all. Hardship is said to be shared. The sharing, upon inspection, has been organised rather unevenly. You arrive at the relief office carrying the same documents as everyone else. Rent receipts, names of children, evidence of wages that have stopped. Perhaps a letter from an employer explaining that there is no work. The papers are identical. The assumptions attached to them are not. A white applicant may be asked how recently her husband worked. You may be asked why you are not already washing, cooking, picking crops, or cleaning someone else's house. The work available to you is treated as natural, regardless of its pay, conditions, or distance from home. For many black women, domestic service remains one of the few occupations consistently open. You may clean a white family's rooms, care for their children, prepare their meals, and wash their clothing while your own children wait at home. The wages are often low and the hours long. Yet relief officials may consider any refusal of such work evidence that you are unwilling to help yourself. Your labour is essential when someone else needs it. Your need becomes suspicious when you request assistance. The Social Security Act of 1935 establishes important protections, including old age benefits and unemployment insurance, but its original structure excludes many agricultural and domestic workers. Because black workers are heavily represented in those fields, the exclusions fall unevenly. Similar gaps appear in early wage and hour protections. The law does not mention race directly. Its effect understands the local labour market perfectly. New Deal work programs do employ many black Americans, and some federal administrators push for fairer treatment. Yet much of the system is operated locally, where segregation and discrimination shape hiring, assignments, wages, and access. One office may follow federal rules carefully. Another may quietly maintain the customs it had before Washington began sending forms. If you are Mexican American, the situation carries a different danger. During the 1930s, local officials, employers, and charitable organizations in parts of the country pressure Mexican families to leave the United States. These campaigns are often described as repatriation, a word suggesting an orderly return home. For many people involved, home is already in the United States. Some are citizens by birth. Children may have never seen Mexico. Families can be threatened with loss of relief, approached by authorities, or offered one-way transportation south. The distinction between voluntary departure and coercion becomes very thin when food assistance depends on making the preferred choice. You may have paid taxes, worked in fields, built railways, raised children, and lived in the same town for years. Then someone behind a desk explains that the most economical solution is for your family to disappear. Native American families face poverty made worse by decades of land loss, underfunding, forced assimilation, and federal control. New Deal programs bring some jobs and reforms, including projects connected with the Civilian Conservation Corps and the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934. Yet conditions differ greatly between reservations, and federal assistance remains entangled with outside control over land, work, education, and family life. Asian American communities also encounter exclusion laws, restrictions on citizenship and land ownership, segregated schools in some areas, and hostility that does not pause for an economic emergency. An applicant who is considered foreign may be treated as less deserving even after years of residence and labour. The Depression does not create these prejudices. It gives them new paperwork. Inside the office, you answer every question carefully. You keep your voice calm. You do not show anger, because anger can be entered into the record as ingratitude. You do not leave, because the children still need food. At last, you receive a smaller grocery order, a place on a delayed work list, or instructions to return with another document. Perhaps you are denied entirely. You step outside holding the same empty purse you carried inside. The nation has told you that everyone must endure hardship together. It has simply neglected to mention that some families will be asked to endure more of it, stand farther back in line, and remain grateful for the arrangement. When the dishes are finished and the room has grown dark, the radio offers escape. If your family owns one and can keep it operating, voices arrive from far beyond the kitchen. Comedy programs, dramas, music, news, advertisements, advice shows, and President Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chats turn a wooden cabinet into a connection with the country. Neighbours without radios may visit. Children lie on the floor. Adults mend, read, or sit quietly while performers create glamorous hotels, detective offices, western towns, and cheerful households inside the same room where the rent remains unpaid. The radio reassures, sells, distracts, and occasionally reminds you of products you cannot afford. For half an hour, the walls move outward. Then an announcer recommends a new refrigerator, and the walls return to their original position. The radio sits on a shelf, table, or cabinet in the warmest room of the house. It may be a large wooden set with a glowing dial, decorative cloth over the speaker, and several knobs that require patience rather than confidence. Smaller tabletop models are available too, though even a modest radio represents money that once had to be found. Perhaps it was purchased during better years and is still being paid for. Perhaps it was bought second-hand. Perhaps a relative gave it to you after acquiring a newer model. Whatever its history, it has become one of the family's most valuable possessions. You turn the knob and wait. The tubes inside need time to warm. For several seconds, nothing happens. Then comes a low hum, a crackle, and a burst of static loud enough to suggest that the country is communicating through frying bacon. You adjust the dial slowly. A voice appears, disappears, and returns beneath a layer of interference. Another station breaks through with dance music. Somewhere else, an announcer is describing soap with the solemnity of a national emergency. At last, the program begins. The children settle onto the rug. One rests his chin in both hands. Another moves closer to the cabinet as though the actors might be visible through the speaker cloth if approached correctly. You continue mending beneath the lamp, but your hands slow when the story becomes interesting. Radio drama depends on sound. A door slams. Footsteps cross an imaginary hallway. Horses gallop through a western landscape created by wooden blocks and skilled technicians. A detective enters a dark office that exists entirely between your ears. The family does not need tickets, transportation, or suitable clothing. The whole performance has arrived in the sitting room and has not even asked for coffee. Comedy programs provide another kind of relief. Familiar performers return each week with characters, misunderstandings, music, and jokes that allow listeners to laugh at household troubles, marriage, work, and money without denying that any of them are difficult. A family may have spent the day worrying about rent, but for 30 minutes, it can listen to someone else mishandle a smaller problem professionally. Advertisements are woven into the entertainment. Sponsors offer soap, cereal, coffee, medicines, tobacco, automobiles, appliances, and household products. The announcer explains that a particular purchase will improve health, happiness, beauty, digestion, family harmony, and possibly national morale. You listen while darning a sock beneath a lamp you are using sparingly. The refrigerator being advertised has polished handles, dependable cooling, and shelves arranged for foods your pantry has not met recently. Still, the advertisement is cheerful. Cheerfulness, unlike the refrigerator, enters free of charge. News broadcasts bring the outside world closer. You hear about elections, strikes, drought, bank policy, foreign affairs, and the slow movement of economic recovery. Sometimes the news is reassuring. Sometimes it makes the room feel smaller again. President Roosevelt's fireside chats create a particularly intimate experience. Beginning in 1933, his radio addresses explain banking measures, government programs, and national problems in a calm, direct voice. Millions listen. You may not understand every policy detail, but you understand the tone. The president sounds as though he is speaking across the room rather than from Washington. In a period filled with rumour and fear, that matters. The family sits quietly while he talks about banks, jobs, or recovery. Your husband listens closely. You study his face. For a little while, the national crisis sounds like something being handled by actual adults, which is a comforting novelty. Neighbours may gather around the set when an important speech, boxing match, comedy programme, or musical performance is scheduled. Extra chairs are brought in. Coffee is poured if there is enough. Someone arrives late and is instructed to remain quiet until the commercial. The room becomes fuller, warmer, and less private. It also becomes less lonely. When the final program ends, you turn the knob. The voices disappear into static and then silence. The glowing dial fades. The bills remain beneath the sugar bowl. Tomorrow's laundry remains in its basket. The pantry has not expanded. But for one evening, the household has visited distant cities, solved a mystery, heard an orchestra, laughed together, and listened to the president explain that the country may survive. The radio has made the room larger. Now that it is off, everyone must be careful not to trip over the furniture. At last, the house grows quiet. You check the stove, cover the remaining food, set something to soak, fold the driest laundry, and place tomorrow's bread where mice will have to demonstrate serious ambition to reach it. The coins are counted once more. A note may be left beside the lunch pail. You look in on the children and pull a blanket over a shoulder. Perhaps your husband has found a day's work. Perhaps he has not. Perhaps a letter, payment, relief voucher, order for sewing, or basket of vegetables will arrive tomorrow. You do not know. That is the heaviest part of the depression household. Not merely having too little, but never knowing how long too little will last. Still, breakfast must appear in the morning. You turn down the lamp. Tomorrow has made no promises, but it has already placed an order. The last plate is washed in water that has already performed several duties this evening. You wipe it with a cloth, inspect the chipped edge, and return it to the cupboard. The chip has been there for years. Everyone knows which side to hold. Replacing the plate would cost money, while remembering its dangerous corner remains pleasantly free. The dishwater may be saved briefly for wiping the stove or scrubbing the floor near the table. Warm water is too valuable to leave after only one assignment. By the time it is carried away, it has washed dishes, softened a pan, cleaned a cloth, and become far more productive than several public committees. You cover the remains of supper. A spoonful of beans, half a biscuit, and a little gravy do not look impressive beneath separate plates, but tomorrow they will be combined with something else and introduced under a new name. You have learned not to judge food by its present condition. Almost everything looks more hopeful after onions. The stove must be settled for the night. You bank the fire if fuel and household practice allow, arranging the coals so a small amount of heat may survive until morning. Too much air and the fuel burns away. Too little and the fire dies completely. You adjust the damper, close the iron door, and listen for the steady, faint sound of the stove cooling. In winter, the kitchen will remain the warmest room for a little while. You stand there longer than necessary, letting the final warmth reach your hands. Then you return to the table and count the money. 1 coin for milk, several for bread or flour. Rent money that must not be touched, though everything else appears determined to touch it. Perhaps there is a nickel left over. A nickel can buy something useful, which means it cannot yet be treated as spare. You place the coins into small envelopes, jars, or folded pieces of paper. Each group receives a purpose before it has an opportunity to become optimistic. Money for coal does not become money for coffee merely because coffee has made an emotional appeal. Your husband may be sitting nearby with his shoes off, studying tomorrow's possibilities. He has heard that a crew may be hiring near the railway yard. The rumour may be true. It may also have been repeated by 30 men who all intend to arrive before him. You ask what time he plans to leave. He says early. During the Depression, early is not a time. It is a competitive strategy. If he has earned wages today, the room feels slightly easier. Not safe, exactly. Safety requires more than one envelope and a few dollars folded inside it. But there is food for several days, something toward the rent, and perhaps enough coal to keep the children from dressing beside the stove in the morning. If he has returned without work, you do not ask too many questions. You saw the answer in his face when he entered. Supper was served. The children spoke about school. For 1 hour, the household allowed him to be their father rather than an unemployed man. Before bed, you check each room. One child has kicked off a blanket. Another sleeps with a book beneath one hand. Their shoes wait near the wall, patched and polished as well as you could manage. In sleep, they look untouched by rent, relief, drought, wages, and the price of milk. You tuck the blanket back into place. Tomorrow they will wake hungry, noisy, hopeful, and completely certain that breakfast is a natural event occurring through no particular effort. You know better. You turn down the lamp until the flame becomes a small golden point. The room retreats into shadow. The pantry is thin. The bills remain. The work is unfinished because household work has no genuine ending, only darkness. Still, the family is warm enough. Everyone has eaten something. The doors are closed. The bread is protected. You climb into bed and listen to the house settle. For tonight, you have held everything together. Morning may now begin preparing its complaints.